Chapter 1299 Arrival of King Tears. The heavenly phoenix divine maiden was radiating with might. A pair of kilometer-long phoenix wings unfurled behind her, burning with raging divine flames. She was like a formidable true phoenix that had just descended into this world. She naturally couldn't stand to hear others slandering Ling Han. There were no heavenly body tier elites in this place, so how could ordinary sun-moon tier cultivators withstand her devastating aura? All of them trembled in fright, feeling as if this woman could incinerate them with a slight flap of her wings. Ha ha ha, young lady, what a powerful aura you possess. Might I be able to witness your strength? There was a long laugh, and a young man had already appeared before the heavenly phoenix divine maiden. There was a look of admiration and possessive desire in his eyes. Beautiful women were easy to find, yet beautiful women who were at the consummate level of the sun-moon tier were as rare as pearls on the imperial crown. The heavenly phoenix divine maiden didn't reply. She simply raised her right hand toward the man, causing countless bursts of flames to condense into a single sword. The young man chuckled, and said, "I'm Rong Tao. May I know your beautiful name, young lady?" Although he was challenging the heavenly phoenix divine maiden, he had absolutely no intention of generating ill will between them. Rather, he was merely using this as an excuse to talk to her. However, how could the heavenly phoenix divine maiden reply? She simply waved her hand, signifying for him to hurry up and make his move if he wanted to battle. "Well then, please excuse me." Rong Tao charged at the heavenly phoenix divine maiden, not holding back a single bit. He was going to suppress this stunning beauty as quickly as he could. He was experienced with women, and he knew that beauties like the heavenly phoenix divine maiden were all extremely proud. If he wanted to capture their hearts, simply flattering them wouldn't be enough. He would have to defeat them first, and only then would they let go of their pride. The heavenly phoenix divine maiden wielded her sword of flames as she moved to meet Rong Tao's attack. She was also unleashing her full strength. She would subdue her opponent as quickly as possible to clear Ling Han's name. The two of them became locked in an intense battle, and a look of shock quickly spread across Rong Tao's face. This was because he discovered that his opponent was extremely powerful. In fact, she was so powerful that he saw absolutely no chance of obtaining victory. They were both at the peak stage of the consummate level of the sun-moon tier, yet the heavenly phoenix divine maiden was a 4-star genius, while Rong Tao was only a 2-star genius. With a difference of 2 stars between their battle prowess, it was clear that the heavenly phoenix divine maiden enjoyed a crushing advantage. It wasn't long before Rong Tao was sent flying by a sword strike. He had no choice but to surrender and flee with his tail between his legs. The heavenly phoenix divine maiden retracted her sword of flames and phoenix wings, and faintly said, "When battling at the same cultivation level, Ling Han can defeat me with a single strike." Gasp! Everyone gasped in astonishment. This was a frightening proposition. Rong Tao was already so powerful, yet he was still defeated by the heavenly phoenix divine maiden after only a few exchanges. Moreover, they were both at the same cultivation level, and this conformed to the rules of battle in the mountain river forest. Yet, the heavenly phoenix divine maiden had announced that she couldn't withstand a single strike of Ling Han's. Is Ling Han truly that powerful? At the very least, they were now aware of a young prodigy called Ling Han. They knew that he was a prodigy who would perhaps rise to ultimate glory. Ling Han smiled, and said, "Why bother with them? When I crush everyone and win first place, my actions will speak louder than any words ever could. I can't stand listening to others slander you," the heavenly phoenix divine maiden said. There was a sense of womanly stubbornness about her. Ling Han's heart fluttered, and he said, "Let's head somewhere else. Your husband will make sure to reward you well." The heavenly phoenix divine maiden rolled her eyes, and said, "You dare? Be careful of being pummeled by me." Ling Han grinned, and said, "Didn't you say that I could defeat you with a single strike if we were at the same cultivation level?" I was only lying to them. If you dare to get physical with me, I'll send you flying with a single smack, the heavenly phoenix divine maiden warned. Ling Han laughed loudly before leaning in next to her ear, and whispering, "Say, wife, I've also become stronger, so you can't view me as you did in the past. Right now, I'm genuinely capable of suppressing you in a single move. You dare?" The heavenly phoenix divine maiden shot a glare at him. However, the look in her eyes was extremely entrancing and seductive. Ling Han's heart fluttered again, and he was just about to act on his words. At the very least, he would steal a kiss. However, a loud rumble suddenly boomed over from in front of them, and he looked up, only to see a starship descending from the sky. Everyone in the surroundings hurriedly ran aside. After a short while, a hatch on the starship opened, and youth stepped out. No, it would be more accurate to call him a teenager, as he only looked to be around 16 or 17 years old. However, the aura exuded from him was incredibly powerful. He was a young king tier. Whenever he took a step, it was as if the entire world were shaking. One couldn't help but feel impressed by him. "Yang Lin," someone yelled his name out in a trembling voice. Yes, this person was none other than Yang Lin, a supreme prodigy who was not only talented but also unbelievably lucky. He had obtained a damaged saint tool and, as a result, could even suppress lower-level heavenly body tier elites. "Yang Lin, I love you. I want to have children with you." Some bold women immediately started to profess their love for him. They were fervent with excitement. Yang Lin strode forward, 4 people following behind him. They were all dragons among men and phoenixes among women, the aura that radiated from them also incredibly overwhelming. However, it was clear from their posture that their status was below that of Yang Lin. They were most likely his followers. This was astonishing. These 4 people were definitely prodigies, yet they were actually willing to become Yang Lin's followers. However, this also accentuated Yang Lin's image as a supreme prodigy. As expected, he's no weaker than Faceless, Ling Han thought to himself. However, Yang Lin definitely wasn't as young as he looked. Rather, he had probably eaten some divine fruit that had caused him to look especially young and tender. Yang Lin continued forward, and everyone automatically moved aside to clear a path for him. To say nothing of Sun-Moon tier cultivators, even heavenly body tier elites might be suppressed by his damaged saint tool. So, who would dare to stand in his way? Ling Han couldn't help but sigh in emotion. Yang Lin merely owned a damaged saint tool, yet he was already able to command such respect and awe. Meanwhile, he owned a saint tool in the Black Tower, yet all he could do was use it to hide and protect himself. This was far too embarrassing. "Well, I'm so sorry," Small Tower grumbled coldly. A short while after Yang Lin's arrival, another heavyweight prodigy arrived. It was a woman who was as beautiful as a fairy. In fact, she was no less beautiful than the heavenly phoenix divine maiden. Her aura was extraordinary, and she was like a noble and graceful princess. She was the Cloud Maiden, daughter to the Emperor of the Thousand Peak Imperial Empire. She was the embodiment of nobility, beauty, and talent. Next to her, there stood a strong and handsome young man. The two of them walked side by side, and they appeared to be especially intimate with each other. One could imagine just how many men were red-eyed with envy. He's Wuxia, the disciple of the Thousand Peak Emperor. He's also an outstanding prodigy, and he's only a tad less talented than the Cloud Maiden. However, he's cultivated for longer than her, and he's already reached the heavenly body tier. It's said that the Thousand Peak Emperor intends to betroth his daughter to him. Judging by the Cloud Maiden's expression, it seems like she's also interested in Wuxia. Sigh, all the amazing beauties have been won over by pigs. Why has no one discovered my outstanding talent? Yeah, keep dreaming. The Cloud Maiden had been accompanied here by Wuxia, and she had also arrived on a starship. Her starship was glowing with extravagance, and it was inscribed with all kinds of formations that could withstand galaxy-level catastrophes. Ling Han's eyes gleamed with yearning when he saw this starship, mainly because it was constructed from a huge amount of godly metal. If he could obtain this wealth of godly metal, his divine demon sword would advance at least half a level, if not directly to level 8. A feeling of jealousy arose in the heavenly phoenix divine maiden's heart, and she couldn't help but aggressively pinch Ling Han's waist. Chapter 1302 Saintly Materials. Following the arrival of more and more prodigies, the true elites of the two realms also started to arrive in the surroundings. However, they wouldn't reveal themselves to the crowds. Who knew whether the elites of the enemy realm wouldn't take this opportunity to massacre the prodigies of their realm? Thus, both sides would deploy elites to guard their own prodigies. For example, the Immortal Realm had deployed the Wide Travel Monk King and the 3,000 Arhat army to guard their prodigies. The Netherworld had definitely deployed elites of a similar level too, though it wasn't clear whom exactly they had deployed. In any case, there was a clear boundary between the prodigies of the two realms, with one side waiting to the left entrance and one side waiting to the right of the entrance. After countless years and numerous gatherings, this had already become a convention. Neither side would venture into their opponent's territory. Several more days passed, and Faceless finally arrived. He was especially low-key, and no one noticed his arrival. After finding Ling Han, he retrieved some fine wine and started to drink heartily with Ling Han. However, he paid absolutely no attention to the heavenly phoenix divine maiden. His personality was truly a little strange. When the regulations shrouding the mountain river forest suddenly dissipated, everyone knew that the two-realm prodigy gathering was finally about to begin. Those who wished to etch their names in the history books all started to venture into the canyon. As long as one could pass this canyon, they would have proved their worth to be called a prodigy. Moreover, they would win the right to fight against the most powerful prodigies in the world. However, such prodigies were few and far between. Many people were forced to retreat after advancing only 1/10 of the distance. Some people were stubborn, and they were able to advance 2/10 of the distance. However, they immediately started to vomit blood once they got back to the entrance. Many more people retreated after advancing only a single step. This was an arena for prodigies, and ordinary cultivators and mortals were only worthy of being spectators. Ling Han, the heavenly phoenix divine maiden, and Faceless were in no rush to enter the canyon. After all, this two-realm prodigy gathering would last for 15 entire days. Yang Lin was the first king-tier prodigy to enter the canyon. He appeared extremely relaxed, and he didn't falter a single bit as he strolled to the end of the canyon. His 4 followers were also extremely powerful, and they all managed to pass the canyon, albeit with some slight stumbles. This left many people speechless. Not only was Yang Lin freakishly impressive, but even his followers were tremendously powerful. The Cloud Maiden also entered the canyon, a relaxed expression on her face. Her footsteps were as light and as graceful as a fairy's. Surprisingly, it was actually Xiaofan who was struggling to keep up. It was clear that starting from this canyon, possessing a cultivation level above the Sun-Moon tier would be of no significance. The only thing that was important was the level one had achieved in the Mountain River tier. Had one reached the pinnacle level? If so, how far had they advanced in the pinnacle level? Xiaofan was indeed at the heavenly body tier. However, whether or not he had reached the pinnacle level of the Mountain River tier was another matter altogether. Even if he had reached the pinnacle level, he had most likely only reached the early stage. Otherwise, it wouldn't make sense that he was struggling so much more than the Cloud Maiden. Meanwhile, the Netherworld obviously had their own king-tier prodigies as well. Ling Han saw a man who had a red sun hovering above his head and exuding a devastating aura. It was as if heaven and earth were about to collapse with each step that he took. After gazing at him for a short while, the pressure that exuded from him made Ling Han feel an urge to vomit blood. Ling Han turned to look at Faceless. Although Faceless didn't have a face, he could still sense the strong sense of apprehension that was radiating from him. However, this sense of apprehension quickly transformed into excitement. Not only has this person reached the heavenly body tier, but he's definitely cultivated each preceding tier to a state of perfection as well. In fact, it's possible that he possesses other abilities as well. He's an extremely worthy opponent. Qi Huangji. Qi Huangji. Qi Huangji. A deafening roar erupted from the Netherworld camp. They were all shouting a person's name. Ling Han couldn't help but feel astonished. This person is Qi Huangji? I guess this makes sense. After all, how many people can reach the heavenly body tier at such a young age? In terms of aura alone, Ling felt that none of the Cloud Maiden, On Lin, or Faceless could compete against Qi Huangji. They were all king tiers, yet Qi Huangji was a king tier among king tiers, an emperor among emperors. Moreover, Qi Huangji was most likely publicly acknowledged as the #1 prodigy of the Netherworld, at least in the galaxy that he resided in. In any case, the Immortal Realm and Netherworld were both far too vast, and thus this so-called two-realm prodigy gathering was only attended by prodigies from certain regions of the two realms. For the Immortal Realm, this region was the Long Light Galaxy. Thus, this claim of two-realm gathering was actually slightly exaggerated. Anyhow, none among the Cloud Maiden, Yang Lin, and Yuing enjoyed a significant advantage over the others. With such a comparison, Ling Han didn't have very high hopes for the Immortal Realm. Of course, this was because he hadn't included himself. Rumble. Heaven and earth shook as a huge commotion erupted in the distance. It was as if an army of thousands were charging over. Everyone instantly became alert. The battle between the two realms had only come to an end 2 years ago, and thus everyone was still very much on guard. They were afraid that another major war was about to break out. However, when they saw the army clearly, their expressions all became strange. This was merely a carriage. Yet, this carriage could actually exude the might of an army of thousands? Strange. What was stranger was the fact that this carriage was pitifully small. It was only as large as a human palm, and it was being drawn by a purple gold bull. If one looked closely, they would realize that this bull was actually forged from metal. Is this a puppet? Everyone was stunned when they looked more closely. The carriage whizzed by, and the space that it shot through collapsed in on itself. It was as if even the great Tao was being suppressed and restricted, transforming into bursts of swirls in the void. This was incredibly astonishing. Where on earth had this carriage come from? That's Phoenix blood true gold, an elder said in a quivering voice. His cultivation level wasn't high, yet he was extremely knowledgeable and well-read. What's Phoenix blood true gold? Many people asked in confusion. Saintly material. Their elder merely said 2 words, yet everyone was stunned upon hearing this reply. Saintly material. This represented material that had reached at least level 17. Moreover, such material could be used to forge saint tools. Saintly material wasn't limited to metals either, and they could also come in the form of rocks, wood, or other things. That purple gold bull is forged from Phoenix blood true gold, and it's at least halfway to obtaining full intelligence. In fact, it's already developed life essence and vitality. The elder's voice quivered with awe and excitement, and he continued, moreover, that carriage is constructed from returning dream wood. It's also a saintly material. Now that I've personally witnessed saintly material, I can truly die without regrets. I can truly die without regrets. Fuck, there are actually 2 saintly materials and not 1? Everyone was numb with shock. Who was the owner of this carriage? Their background was far too terrifying. The carriage stopped right in front of the canyon. Although the canyon wasn't shrouded by the regulations of heaven and earth anymore, this didn't mean that the regulations had disappeared. They had merely become non-lethal to those who entered the canyon. However, one's cultivation would still be suppressed to the mountain river tier if they were to enter, even if they were a Genesis tier saint. Meanwhile, the cultivators from the netherworld were just as stunned as the cultivators from the immortal realm. There were also knowledgeable people among them, and they had also recognized the two saintly materials. The carriage door opened, and a mini-person jumped out under everyone's watchful gaze. This was genuinely a miniature person, and they measured no more than 3 inches in height. They were dressed a purple gold robe, and the might that they exuded was as if they yearned to suppress the heavens. That robe is knitted from phoenix blood true gold that has been rolled into thread. Good heavens! Someone was actually able to roll saintly material into thread and knit it into a robe. Just how profound is their power? Everyone was shaking with shock and awe. The grandeur of this person's arrival was far beyond anything they could imagine. In fact, it was something that seemed transcendent above the long light galaxy. The mini-person shuddered slightly, and then grew to the size of a normal human. This was a handsome man whose skin was smooth and as delicate as jade. This wasn't a metaphor, his skin literally looked like it had been carved from jade. Saintly material was obviously mysterious, and his purple gold robe also grew in size to fit his physique. North Emperor, have you still not arrived yet? The man shouted toward the sky. Chapter 13:01 Astonishing Backgrounds. You merely arrived one step before me. Don't act as if you've been waiting for me for a long time. A voice traveled over from the distance, yet it was as if this person were whispering next to their ears. His words were especially crisp and clear. The handsome jade-like man chuckled, and said, "Arriving one step before is still arriving before you, no? Are you not satisfied with this?" There was a faint chuckle, and another person had already appeared next to the jade-like man. He was an extremely handsome man who possessed a mighty and regal aura. Another supreme being. The heavenly phoenix divine maiden couldn't help but feel anxious. Although she was fully confident in Ling Han's abilities, these two people, as well as Huangji, were all transcendent above the level of ordinary young king tiers. In fact, their might was so lofty that people couldn't even look up to them while standing. They had to kneel down in awe and submission before they could truly gaze up and admire their might. These two men were both at the heavenly body tier. Moreover, they were astonishingly young, with their flames of life still raging and bright. No matter how one looked at them, they were definitely under 10,000 years old. "Is that a naturally born rock spirit?" a knowledgeable person asked. Gasp! "I know who they are now," someone suddenly shouted in fervent excitement. "Who on earth are they?" the others all asked. In the distant Plentiful Sea galaxy, there exists a saint called the Plentiful Sea Saint. He only has a single disciple, and that disciple's name is North Emperor. Meanwhile, there's also a saint in the Universal Tao Galaxy, a galaxy that neighbors the Plentiful Sea Galaxy. The identity of this saint is actually a peculiar stone that developed intelligence and eventually entered a path of cultivation. He's called the Cloud Stone Saint, and he has a child with a human. This child inherited a portion of his bloodline, and he was born incredibly powerful. His name is Stone Emperor. Everyone was speechless with shock and amazement. Saints. Saints had actually appeared in their galaxy. Compared to them, Yang Lin, who had merely obtained a damaged saint tool, seemed like an absolute pauper. Would you look, the Stone Emperor was casually riding a carriage that was constructed from returning dream wood and pulled by a bull that was forged from phoenix blood true gold. These were both saintly materials. However, this Stone Emperor person was truly high profile. Compared to him, the North Emperor was much more restrained. Not only did he not have a carriage, but he didn't even have a single follower. Are they also here to attend the Two-Realm Prodigy gathering? Ling Han nodded in his mind. The immortal realm finally had prodigies who could compete against Huangji. Moreover, these two individuals would also become formidable opponents of his. If they fought a fair battle, of course he wouldn't be able to defeat them. After all, they were both heavenly body tier elites. However, once they entered the mountain river forest, everyone's cultivation would be suppressed to the mountain river tier. If they battled at the same cultivation level, Ling Han reckoned that he definitely wouldn't lose to anyone. Otherwise, he would have genuinely wasted the indestructible Heaven's Scroll. It was a cultivation technique from the celestial realm. The Stone Emperor and North Emperor paid no heed to the other prodigies gathered here. They strode into the canyon and quickly disappeared into the distance. However, even though the Stone Emperor had left his carriage resting here just like that, not a single person dared to have any greedy thoughts about it. Of course they didn't. Those were saintly materials, and that bull had even developed a shred of intelligence. If it unleashed its power, even Eternal River tier elites would be obliterated if they dared to near it. That being the case, who dared to touch the carriage and bull? The appearance of the two kings among kings took the wind out of the netherworld's sail. Who would have thought that two extragalactic prodigies would suddenly appear at this two-realm prodigy gathering? In reality, there were three such prodigies, if one counted Ling Han. Sure enough, it wasn't a mistake to come here. This trip is completely worth it. There was a gleam in Faceless' eyes, and this could be seen even through the cloth that he wore around his face. Young King Tiers wouldn't cower no matter how powerful their opponent was. Even if they couldn't defeat their opponent, they would view them as a goal to strive toward and eventually surpass. In fact, being invincible would leave them feeling extremely lonely. Invincibility would mean no motivation to improve and no target to strive toward. "Brother Ling, should we also set off?" Faceless asked. After seeing so many king tier prodigies arrive, he was already burning with fighting spirit. He was hungry for a battle. "Sure," Ling Han said with a nod. He left Little Qing outside as its cultivation was still too weak. There was simply no way it could pass through the canyon. Moreover, Ling Han didn't want to expose the secret of his black tower, so he naturally couldn't place Ling Qing back inside now. Little Qing belonged to the skies anyway, so he might as well let it soar through the sky for a few days. Ever since hatching, this little chick had never experienced independence for several days in a row. As for the old ginseng and rabbit, he would also leave them to their own devices. First of all, they didn't necessarily possess the ability to pass through the canyon. Second of all, they had absolutely no interest in becoming king tiers. Ling Han, the heavenly phoenix divine maiden, and Faceless walked into the canyon. After taking just a single step, they immediately felt an overwhelming pressure bear down upon them. This pressure made them feel the urge to immediately turn around and leave. However, Ling Han and Faceless were both young king tiers. Although the heavenly phoenix divine maiden was slightly inferior, she was still a 4-star genius. So, how could they be troubled by this amount of pressure? They channeled their origin power for a moment before starting to stride forward. They weren't affected by the pressure a single bit. However, after reaching the halfway mark, the heavenly phoenix divine maiden started to show signs of exertion. She couldn't maintain her relaxed demeanor anymore, and sweat started to roll down her forehead. Meanwhile, Ling Han and Faceless still appeared just as carefree and as relaxed as before. It was clear that the lowest threshold for passing this canyon was being a 4-star genius. However, such prodigies would still face a significant amount of pressure. In order to pass this canyon, they would need not only strength but also willpower. Upon seeing the heavenly phoenix divine maiden start to struggle, Ling Han reached over and grabbed her in his arms. "Ah, what are you doing?" The heavenly phoenix divine maiden was caught off guard, and she couldn't help but yelp in surprise. She hurriedly tried to push Ling Han away. "Wife, you look so tired. How about I carry you through this canyon?" Ling Han suggested with a smile. Embarrassment spread across the heavenly phoenix divine maiden's face. If it were only the two of them, she wouldn't mind Ling Han being so close and intimate. However, this wasn't the case. "There are others watching," she said softly. "Brother Ling, both of us are striving to reach the pinnacle of the cultivation path, so I suggest you don't waste your time on women," Faceless said coldly. He glanced at the heavenly phoenix divine maiden, and there was a hint of killing intent in his eyes. It was as if he wanted to exterminate a potential danger for Ling Han. The heavenly phoenix divine maiden's impression of him instantly dropped to rock bottom. This person actually wanted to separate her from Ling Han. Moreover, his method was incredibly ruthless and brutal. This Faceless ****. He deserves to never find a wife. Ling Han laughed loudly, and said, "Brother Faceless, you should also try to look for a lover. Believe me, having a lover definitely won't have detrimental effects on your cultivation. In fact, it will provide you with even more motivation to reach the summit of cultivation. Wanting to protect those close to you is an incredibly powerful motivation." Faceless shook his head in reply. His heart was especially pure, and cultivation was the only thing on his mind. He didn't need to place his attention elsewhere. With Ling Han carrying her, the heavenly phoenix divine maiden naturally didn't feel any more pressure. The three of them passed through the canyon in no time at all. The overwhelming pressure instantly disappeared, yet a peculiar power suddenly enveloped their bodies and suppressed their cultivation to the mountain river tier. No, this wasn't power. Rather, it was a type of regulation. Not only did it suppress them to the mountain river tier, it even suppressed their ability to wield regulations to the mountain river tier. It was as if the mountain river tier was the absolute upper limit of this world. Thus, it mattered little how freakish and how prodigious one was. Could humans defeat heaven? Sure enough, we've been suppressed to the mountain river tier. Ling Han familiarized himself with the power in his body. The 4 suns and moons in his body had mysteriously disappeared, and even his physique had suddenly become far weaker than just then. It was only as tough as level 5 godly metal. However, the toughness of level 5 godly metal still belonged to the sun-moon tier. His physique hadn't been nerfed completely. Apart from a select few king tiers who had reached a state of perfection in the pinnacle level of the mountain river tier, ordinary king tiers wouldn't even be able to penetrate Ling Han's defenses. The indestructible heaven scroll was a cultivation technique from the celestial realm. This was no joke. Chapter 13029 King Tiers. Right now, the cultivation level of everyone was suppressed to the mountain river tier, regardless of whether their original cultivation level was at the sun-moon tier or heavenly body tier. The same applied to saint tools, and those who possessed them could only unleash might that was within the limits of the mountain river tier. However, whether this might reach the consummate level of the mountain river tier or the pinnacle level of the mountain river tier would be dependent on the level of the saint tool and its wielder. Meanwhile, the prodigies were in no hurry to enter the mountain river forest. They were all waiting at the exit of the canyon. For some people, this was the first time they had entered the mountain river forest. However, this wasn't the first time that the mountain river forest had opened. Thus, even though they had never come here before, they had heard all kinds of legends about the mountain river forest. The first step is to select 9 kings. The mountain river forest was clearly formed by the collisions of regulations, yet it was as if it possessed a spirit, one which separated the competition between prodigies into 2 stages. Ling Han looked ahead, where 9 platforms of different sizes rested in front of a vast forest. The first stage of the competition involved battling on these platforms. After 3 days, those who remained standing on these platforms would receive the blessing of heaven and earth. After another 3 days, these 9 individuals would be brought into the forest to complete stage 2 of the competition, where the victor would be crowned as the king among kings. Only a single person could emerge victorious on each of these platforms, and if there was more than one person on a platform when the time was up, everyone on the platform would be eliminated. The 9 individuals who remained standing at the end would receive the blessing of heaven and earth and have their body tempered. This process would strengthen their physique considerably, and it would even provide them with an opportunity to intertwine with heaven and earth and comprehend their mystical profoundness. Such an experience would elevate their comprehension ability and benefit them for countless years to come. It was also because of these benefits that generation after generation of prodigies gathered here from all corners of the galaxy, regardless of how far away they were. Just the rewards from the higher-ups of the 2 realms weren't enough, and just the fame and glory that they received from the battle wasn't enough either. However, not every 2-realm battlefield had locations like the Mountain River Forest and Sun Moon Valley. Thus, it was also understandable why Supreme King tiers such as the North Emperor and Stone Emperor had appeared here. They were probably here to receive the blessing of heaven and earth. Moreover, the final victor among the 9 kings could receive the blessing of heaven and earth a second time. However, each person could only receive the blessing of heaven and earth a maximum of 2 times. Moreover, this was a cumulative amount. One could receive it once when becoming one of the 9 kings, and a second time if they became the king among kings. If the same person became one of the 9 kings twice, they wouldn't receive the blessing of heaven and earth the second time around. Their only option would be to fight for the title of king among kings. Thus, prodigies who became the king among kings generally wouldn't come here a second time. After all, doing so would be a waste of time and opportunities. Right now, the 9 platforms were still yet to open, so everyone could only stand around and wait. At this moment, even young king tiers like Yang Lin and the Cloud Maiden didn't dare to act wantonly. If 2 king tiers happened to choose the same platform, it would be best if one of them was willing to back down. However, if they chose to engage, it entirely was possible that both of them would be eliminated. The Sun Moon Valley was similar to the Mountain River Forest, and the blessings in the 2 locations couldn't be stacked either. Thus, everyone had 2 chances to receive blessings every 77,777 years. However, who didn't want to receive the blessings of heaven and earth as soon as possible? As such, the king tiers would try their best to steer clear of each other to avoid engaging in battle too early. Only after advancing to the battle for the title of king among kings would they unleash their full power against each other. Ling Han swept his gaze over the prodigies and started to count on his fingers. On the side of the immortal realm, those who had definitely reached the pinnacle level of the Mountain River tier included Yang Lin, the Cloud Maiden, Yu Ying, Faceless, the North Emperor, and the Stone Emperor. Counting himself, this would be 7 people. On the side of the Netherworld, only 2 people had definitely reached the pinnacle level of the Mountain River tier: Huangji and Aoziyun. This being the case, he would have to defeat one of the other 8 people if he wanted to help the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden win a spot among the 9 kings. Ling Han turned his gaze to Aoziyun. When the platforms activated, the battle among the prodigies would continue for 3 straight days. During this time, anyone could ascend the platforms to challenge the current owner of the platform. However, if they lost, they would lose the right to challenge the platform owners for around 15 minutes. If they lost 3 times, they would lose the right to issue any more challenges. This was a rule that could be exploited. He could guard a platform first, all the way until they neared the end of the 3-day period. At that time, he could let the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden challenge him and purposefully let her win. After waiting for the mandatory 15 minutes, he would challenge Aoziyun and kick him off his platform. If he got the timing right, Aoziyun wouldn't have enough time to challenge the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden. However, did the Netherworld genuinely only have 2 king tiers who had reached the pinnacle level of the Mountain River tier? Ling Han shook his head. If he discounted the Stone Emperor, the North Emperor, and himself, the Immortal Realm would only have 4 king tiers at this gathering. The Netherworld was no weaker than the Immortal Realm, so the number of king tiers on their side most likely wouldn't be fewer either. He looked around in search of these king tiers. Perhaps they still hadn't arrived yet. Don't worry about me, the heavenly phoenix divine maiden said. She understood Ling Han extremely well, and she could already guess his thoughts. Ling Han smiled, and said, "If you can receive the blessing this time, perhaps you can advance to the pinnacle level." The heavenly phoenix divine maiden shook her head, and said, "I wish it were that simple." She understood her own abilities, and since she hadn't reached the pinnacle level of the mountain river tier, she knew that she had no right to battle against genuine king tiers. If she drew on the power of her bloodline, perhaps she could battle against those at the early stage of the pinnacle level. However, whether or not she could win would be down to luck. "Wife, don't worry. In any case, we have 3 days to observe the others," Ling Han said in comfort. However, his brows quickly knit into a frown. This was because another 2 netherworld king tiers had arrived. One was a person who had a golden lion head, while the other was a being who was composed of some mist-like substance. The latter being didn't have a set form, and it continued to twist and transform. As such, it naturally didn't possess an appearance to speak of. The king tier with the golden lion head was called Tuobadong, and the mist-like king tier was called Dan Gu. Once they appeared, many netherworld prodigies started to shake their heads. This was naturally because they realized that the difficulty of becoming one of the 9 kings had risen exponentially following the arrival of these 2 beings. Ling Han decided to stick with his original plan. All he needed to do was guard a platform for 3 days. This would be especially easy as long as he didn't have to battle against the North Emperor, Stone Emperor, or Huangji. The heavenly phoenix divine maiden couldn't convince him to change his mind, so she could only nod her head and agree to his plan. However, there was an overwhelming sense of pride in her mind. The domineering might of her lover melted her heart. Prodigies continued to arrive, yet none of the new arrivals were king tiers. Everyone sat cross-legged on the ground and brought themselves to their peak condition. It wouldn't be long before they were fighting for a spot in the 9 kings. Another day passed, and the entrance to the mountain river forest suddenly started to dim. After a short while, it surprisingly disappeared from their sight. It was as if the canyon had never existed. Those who were here for the first time were all extremely astonished, while those who had come here before were all extremely calm. This was merely the mountain river forest locking itself off. At this moment, no one else would be able to enter. At the same time, the mist that enveloped the 9 platforms also started to dissipate. This signified the beginning of the battle for the 9 kings. He. The Stone Emperor was the first person to leap over and claim a platform. Moreover, he had returned to his miniature form of 3 inches tall once again. By the looks of it, this was probably his true form. He had used his origin power to maintain his normal size just then, which was exactly the same as what Ling Han was currently doing at this moment. The North Emperor was the second person to leap over and claim an platform. He didn't challenge the Stone Emperor, instead choosing an unoccupied platform. He sat down and placed a saber on his lap. He then proceeded to gaze at the saber with his full attention as if this saber were the great Tao of heaven and earth. A tremendous fighting spirit flashed across Huangji's eyes. Meanwhile, the red sun above his head glowed with a brilliant divine light that was so radiant that it was almost blinding. After staring at the Stone Emperor and North Emperor for a while, he chose to claim a third unoccupied platform. Right now wasn't the time to battle against these 2 formidable opponents. Chapter 1303 Strive. The 3 king tiers among king tiers had the first choice of platform, and this made it much simpler for the other king tiers to choose. They merely had to avoid the 3 of them. "Brother Ling, I'm going first," Faceless said. With a loud battle cry, he landed on a platform. The king tiers all jumped out, their speed extremely fast. There were more than 9 king tiers here, so there would definitely be an advance collision between prodigies of king tier grade. This was something that all the other prodigies wanted to avoid. Thus, they all wanted to quickly occupy a platform, show off their battle prowess, and cause the other king tiers to fear challenging them. On the other hand, if they were too slow, they could only pick one of the other king tiers and battle. This was being passive. Of course, those who moved slower also had an advantage, and that was that they could pick the pushovers, or even cooperate with others. However, king tiers would probably disdain from doing this kind of action. Ling Han was not impatient, and decided to watch first. The present 9 kings appeared. On the Immortal Realm side, it was the North Emperor, Stone Emperor, Faceless, Yang Lin and the Cloud Maiden. On the Netherworld side, it was Huangji, Tuoba Dong, Dan Gu and Ao Ziyun. There was no rule that it was a 1v1 duel on the platform battles. They could completely gang up on one of them. Thus, after a momentary silence, dozens of Immortal Realm prodigies ascended the platform and joined forces to challenge Tuoba Dong, Dan Gu, and Ao Ziyun. And on the side of the Immortal Realm, aside from the North Emperor and Stone Emperor, the other 3 people were similarly targeted by the combined attacks of a great many Netherworld elites. Each person had 3 chances to fail. Thus, as long as they could work together and kill a king tier 3 times, they would be able to eliminate this king tier. There would always be a few lucky people that could take advantage. Being boosted by luck, who knew, maybe they could also manage to cultivate to pinnacle level and advance into the category of king tier? Then the next time they entered into the Sun Moon Valley, they could challenge the King of Kings themselves. However, what did king tier mean? Only one invincible among his peers could be qualified to be called a king tier, what more when none of the 9 on the platform had cultivated to the pinnacle level. In a situation wherein they had the advantage in cultivation level, numbers could not possibly compensate for this gap. Faceless, Yang Lin, Tuoba Dong, and the others all showed their divine might. Pung, pung, pung. The platform looked like a fairy scattering flowers as prodigies were all sent flying off the platform one after the other. These prodigies all looked livid. Before meeting king tiers, they all took a leading role in their respective areas, having no equal in the same generation. There were even some elites of the older generation that had lost to them, but after they had come here, it was their turn to swallow the bitter fruit of being defeated by one of the same cultivation level. In this place, it was very just. Everyone was in the mountain river tier, and if you had not cultivated to the pinnacle level, that only meant that you were too weak. This kind of acknowledgement caused many prodigies to feel dispirited, but there were also some prodigies that rose vigorously, swearing to cultivate to the pinnacle level in the present major tier. The higher the cultivation level, the harder it was to cultivate to pinnacle level. Thus, if they could only cultivate to pinnacle level once, even if their cultivation level was the same, cultivating to pinnacle level in the Sun Moon tier was definitely more awesome than cultivating to pinnacle level in the Mountain River tier, and the pinnacle level of the Heavenly Body tier far surpassed the pinnacle level of the Sun Moon tier. The path ahead was still very long. Natural talent was one factor, but talent was similarly a quality that cultivators could not lack, and what prodigies lacked was toughness, precisely. That was because their talent was high, and they had had a much too smooth path since childhood, never having suffered blows and setbacks. The moment they encountered a large loss, they could possibly fail to recover. After a while, on the side of the Immortal Realm, Yuing finally made a move to issue a challenge to Ao Ziyun from the Netherworld. Yuing was just like her name, pure, beautiful, and elegant like the moon, without the slightest bit of dust marring her beauty. She wore a long moon-white skirt, and the moment she moved, she was as exquisite as a fairy, causing one's heart to throb involuntarily, yet one would not dare to commit sacrilege. She was a moon goddess, and could only be admired from afar. Yet Ao Ziyun did not look moved in the slightest. With a wave of his spear, he said, "I have long heard that the Blue Cloud Imperial Empire has an extraordinary, incomparable genius, but I have never battled her. Now, I have finally gotten my wish." Due to differing regulations of the two realms, when the immortals looked on the people from the Netherworld, they all seemed to be enshrouded in an air of evil, and it was the same the other way around. Thus, Yu Ying's beauty should have declined greatly in the eyes of beings from the netherworld. Moreover, Ao Ziyun was a king tier, so how could his self-discipline be weak? If one wanted to tempt him with feminine beauty, then even Yu Ying could not accomplish that. It would have to be someone as exquisite as Empress Luanxing. That kind of enchantment did not distinguish between immortals and netherworld beings, and would enchant all. Yu Ying drew her sword. The sword itself was like the bright moon, and juxtaposed against her completely white attire, it was filled with an astonishing beauty. Kill! Ao Ziyun was not the slightest bit moved. The dark destruction black dragon spear waved out, bringing with it a terrifying fiery black cloud. Instantly, the temperature rose endlessly. Perhaps, even level 4 godly metal would be melted very quickly at this kind of heat. Yu Ying waved her long sword, and cold light suddenly washed out. Moonlight was gloomy and cold, and she was probably cultivating a cultivation technique that leaned towards ice element, which just happened to restrain Ao Ziyun and vice versa. The two were embroiled in a fierce battle, and everyone else was watching with rapt attention. Even the other 8 great king tiers on the platform were watching with full concentration. Though the Stone Emperor, North Emperor, and Huangji were possibly slightly superior in terms of battle prowess, their strength was limited. They did not dare to really underestimate the other king tiers. After all, their cultivation level had all been weakened to the Mountain River tier, and while there was a gap in everyone's battle prowess, the gap would definitely be not too big. Ling Han was also watching with much interest. He had fought with Ao Ziyun before, and gave much recognition to this person's abilities. However, when the latter's dragon's might met with his heaven's might, it would be rendered completely useless, and the dark destruction black dragon spear would also be restrained by the divine demon sword, so ultimately, he could only leave in dejection. Yet Yu Ying did not have these two massive advantages. She only had the might of king tier, and did not have the might of heaven and earth. Her divine sword was very strong, but presently, it could only slice through level 4 godly metal and above, but not level 5. Ao Ziyun laughed loudly, and waved the long spear while channeling his dragon's might. A black true dragon appeared in thin air behind him, brandishing its claws and fangs angrily. Yu Ying was instantly affected, her battle prowess dropping greatly. A king tier from the immortal realm is just this much. Ao Ziyun declared proudly. His spear swept out like a world-destroying black dragon, intent on burning all life into ashes. Yu Ying, though, gave a battle cry. A stream of moonlight shot out from her mouth, and actually formed a moon above her head, sprinkling down elegant moonlight and blocking the dragon's might outside. Her battle prowess instantly returned to normal. The divine sword shone, and endlessly clashed with Ao Ziyun's spear. Ling Han nodded. How could a king tier lose so easily? Which of them did not have a few trump cards up their sleeve? Meanwhile, the heavenly phoenix divine maiden shook her head, and said, "Forget it. I am indeed no match for those few people, and if I use schemes to obtain a place, I would not be able to rest easy." "What nonsense are you saying?" Ling Han hugged her slender waist, leaned towards her ear, and whispered, "You are my wife, and if I say you are qualified, you are definitely qualified. Furthermore, we are snatching the entry slots of the netherworld, and that would be winning honor for the immortal realm, so what need is there for you to feel uneasy?" The heavenly phoenix divine maiden couldn't help but feel amused by his words, and retorted, "You speak as if you have already obtained these 2 slots. Ling Han broke into a smile, and said, "Are you underestimating your man here? Cheeky mouth." The heavenly phoenix divine maiden was embarrassed, her beautiful eyes shifting, looking indescribably exquisite. Ling Han felt an itch in his heart. Too bad, too bad. Presently, he had only recovered the bodily functions of a 5 to 6-year-old child, and still did not possess the ability to push her down. "Pa," he slapped his thigh heavily. This was so damn exasperating. "What are you doing?" The heavenly phoenix divine maiden did not know that his whole head was filled with thoughts of pushing her down, or she would definitely not ask that question. Instead, she would directly throw a slap at him. Mosquito, Ling Han uttered through gritted teeth. So basically one stronger than level 4 is okay as long as it didn't reach level 5. Think fractions or something. Chapter 1304 Thrashing a King Tier. The Battle of King Tiers between Ao Ziyun and Yuing finally concluded, with Ao Ziyun winning a narrow victory. In Ling Han's opinion, Yuing had not lost to her opponent in terms of abilities, but had been restrained by Ao Ziyun in the two factors, God Tool and Bloodline. In terms of God Tool, Ao Ziyun was using the backbone of an old dragon of his clan that had died, and would connect with his bloodline itself, which could maximize its might. In terms of power of bloodline, Ao Ziyun's Black Dragon race bloodline should be superior to Yu Ying's. Hence, in a situation wherein cultivation level was equal, once bloodline and God Tool were superior, this would be enough to decide the battle. This kind of battle in which their cultivation levels were forcibly decided looked fair, but in truth was also the most unjust. Why should I have to forcibly reduce my cultivation level to the same cultivation level as yours before commencing the battle when my cultivation level was higher than yours? However, since the regulations in this place decided so, a loss was a loss. There was nothing much left to say. Yuing sat down in a cross-legged position to recover her origin power. She still had 2 chances to issue a challenge. Ling Han nodded internally. It looked like the gap between Prodigy and King Tier was still quite big. Aside from himself and Yuing, the others could not possibly the positions of the 9 kings on the platforms. Since that was so, he would go. Ling Han leaped up, and then landed on a platform. The one he was facing was a netherworld elite that had the head of a golden lion to Obadong. Someone had issued a challenge to the 9 kings. The masses instantly became excited. Everyone felt that they were really unlucky this time round. In previous years, even if there were king tiers, there would not have been so many. The others would still be able to take 2 to 3 places somehow. This time, however, even at least one king tier would be forcibly eliminated. This guy, who is he? I don't recognize him. Hee. Just anyone dares to challenge a king tier to a battle? Some were curious, some were disdainful, and some were expectant. If the 9 kings were decided so quickly, it would be too boring. Ao Ziyun, meanwhile, breathed out a sigh of relief. If Ling Han had challenged him, he would definitely lose. It couldn't be helped. Previously, he had had the advantage of 2 sub-minor levels, yet hadn't he still lost to Ling Han? He was suppressed by the latter in all aspects. Now that everyone's cultivation level had been weakened to Mountain River tier, his disadvantage would definitely be even larger. Tuoba Dong sized up Ling Han, and his gaze turned from disdainful to serious. He could tell that Ling Han was strong. "You will be a tough rival," he declared solemnly. The golden beard at his neck was moving by itself, exuding the might of the king of animals. Ling Han shook his head, and said, "Unfortunately, you cannot be a tough opponent for me." He looked towards the North Emperor, the Stone Emperor, and Huangji. Only they could be tough opponents for him. So arrogant. Tuoba Dong humphed, and brandished a palm strike at Ling Han directly. Hong, origin power swept out, forming a gigantic lion's paw and sweeping out towards Ling Han. Without using any kind of technique, he was planning to win through mere strength. Ling Han stretched out a finger and drew a line. Pooh! The lion's paw was immediately sliced in 2, and the 2 halves passed by on either side of him. A strong gust swept past, but did not even manage to move the slightest bit of his clothes. Gasp! The moment elites moved, they would know how powerful they were. Instantly, exclamations rang out beneath the platform. Though Tuoba Dong had not used his full power, Ling Han had dispersed his attack much too easily. That was only a casual move, as if his opponent was not a young king tier of the present generation, but rather an ordinary mountain river tier. Faceless, meanwhile, sighed. In the past, he had suppressed his cultivation level, and with even more powerful regulations of heaven and earth supporting him, he had still been unable to defeat Ling Han. This guy was practically impossible to see through. The North Emperor, Stone Emperor, and Huangji all looked curious. In terms of true battle prowess, they were all in the heavenly body tier, and would be able to suppress Ling Han just by raising their hand, but their cultivation level had been reduced to the mountain river tier here, and they would be competing in terms of level of mastery of the pinnacle level. Aside from that, bloodline, martial arts techniques, and battle techniques also should not be overlooked in the slightest, as these factors would greatly influence battle prowess. You do have some strength. No wonder you dared to be so arrogant, Tuoba Dong said coldly. Though his attack had not produced results, he was still very confident. The previous blow had only been done casually. I will defeat you in 10 moves, Ling Han stated calmly. In truth, he felt certain that less would be enough, but still felt that it was best to be a bit modest. Tuoba Dong almost exploded in fury. He, a powerful king tier, was promised that he would be defeated within 10 moves in a battle between equals? He was so furious that he smiled instead, and said, "All right then. I really would like to see how you will defeat me within 10 moves." Ling Han smiled, and casually threw out a punch. Wang, the blue divine pattern on his hand appeared, glowing with a blinding light. Instantly, a bolt of lightning rushed forth, turning into an attack that shot out towards Tuoba Dong. What? In an instant, everyone stood up in their shock, their faces filled with astonishment. In this place, who had never experienced the heavenly tribulation? They were naturally clear how terrifying the lightning formed by the tribulation was. It could be said that the heavenly tribulation was definitely among the most dangerous entities in the world, and was one of the most powerful as well. Yet the might of heavenly tribulation belonged to the heaven and earth. This was a power that immortal could not control. Even for lightning element cultivators, they could only channel the power of lightning, which was completely different from divine lightning. Yet Ling Han's hand had actually shot out the lightning of heavenly tribulation. This was fuck bull, they must have seen a ghost. Others were only stunned, but Tuoba Dong could feel all the hair on his body stand on ends, his muscles involuntarily tightened up, and an indescribable fear surged up in him. He could possibly die here. No. Tuoba Dong was a king tier of the current era, after all. He gave a large shout, and pu, all the muscles in his body swelled, forcibly bursting through his clothes. He turned into a golden lion about 30 meters tall. All the fur on his body seemed to have been forged from godly metal, each strand like an arrow. Break! His punch launched out, greeting the lightning. 99 divine patterns appeared on his fist and golden light blazed. The maximum limit of mountain river tier was 99 divine patterns, and even the peak stage of pinnacle level could not possibly surpass that. Boom! A large boom rang out, and Tuoba Dong's figure slid back, right until he had reached the edge of the platform. Only then did he forcibly stop. Wah! He spat out a mouthful of blood, and the gaze he directed at Ling Han was filled with shock. That lightning was not like the heavenly tribulation, but was the heavenly tribulation itself. The destructive ability was too frightening. In terms of power, the two of them were obviously equal, but he had still been blasted back by one strike. Now, all the muscles in his body were trembling. Just ask the world, what man would be able to shake the might of a heavenly tribulation? Experiencing a tribulation would be done and over with once it had passed. Immortals had always been on the receiving end thereof, passively enduring. The heaven and earth would throttle you to the point that you were bleeding and battered, all black and blue, before it was satisfied and would recognize that you were qualified to move forward. Otherwise, the only other option was death. Now, Faced with a man, they would have to endure the interrogation of a divine punishment. Who could bear that? Everyone's expression changed drastically, and the various king tiers all looked solemn. Even if Ling Han had not challenged them, but after the 9 kings were decided, they would still have to defeat the other 8 kings to be able to rise to the top. Ling Han was a barrier they could not avoid. Only the Stone Emperor, North Emperor, and Huangji seemed to have fiery fighting spirit. This kind of opponent was what they desired and dreamt of encountering. Ling Han shot out a fist. Multiple bolts of lightning transformed into angry dragons and began a furious barrage aimed at Tuoba Dong. The latter was worn out through defending, and had to use his full effort to parry the incoming attacks. He had completely no energy left to fight back. The masses couldn't help but inhale sharply. Tuoba Dong was already in king tier, yet in front of Ling Han, he could only be thrashed. Was this the top abilities of king tier? Was this a battle? This was completely a one-sided thrashing. Chapter 1305. You can do that? The one feeling most rueful was the heavenly phoenix divine maiden. When their cultivation levels had been the same, she could easily bully Ling Han as she liked, and eventually forced Ling Han to have no choice but to step onto the path to seek out ancient sites in order to improve his abilities. But now, not only had Ling Han become a prodigy on the level of king tier, but was even a king among kings. With such a husband, what more could she ask for? She smiled dazzlingly, and thought that she did not have to be so competitive in the future anymore. With such a strong shoulder for her lean on, it was really comforting. I forfeit. Tuoba Dong was not a person who could not go with the flow. As a king tier, he was more able to clearly see the gap between himself and his opponent, and only with the ability to see the gap between them would he be able to continuously improve. Otherwise, even if he was a king tier, he would slowly decline to become only a top-grade prodigy, and then become an ordinary prodigy, or even become mediocre. Ling Han couldn't help but smile, and said, I seem to have used more than 10 moves. He did not just deliver 10 punches. Tuoba Dong smiled bitterly. Though Ling Han had not delivered just 10 strikes, every punch was done carelessly. He had not used his full power at all. He, on the other hand, had used his full battle prowess, and had only a few powerful moves that he did not use. That was because he knew that even if he used them, it would be useless. On the contrary, it would only cause his battle prowess to drop drastically. In any case, he had only lost this once, and still had 2 chances to issue a challenge. There was no need for him to fight Ling Han to the death here. He leaped off the platform, and went to rest for a while. Like Ying, he was intending to target a pushover. Ling Han sat down in a cross-legged position, and waited for others to challenge him, though this was practically impossible. The people below the platform had also begun a new round of challenges after a long rest. This time, it was even more exaggerated. Over 100 prodigies collectively gathered on a single platform, and had all cramped onto this one platform such that it was practically impenetrable. The ones being targeted were the Cloud Maiden and Ao Ziyun. Those that could come here were 3-star geniuses at least. With so many challengers, this was really very frightening, but to no avail. The Cloud Maiden and Ao Ziyun had both cultivated the pinnacle level to perfection, and possessed the advantage of at least 4 stars of battle prowess. This was not something that could be compensated by over 100 people. Ordinarily speaking, 10 people could compensate for the gap of a single star of battle prowess, but then how many people would be needed to compensate for 4 stars? 10 to 4th power, meaning 10,000 people. Furthermore, it was necessary for the attacks of these 10,000 people to land at the same time, and this would require a formation. Seamless cooperation was needed as well, which would make it even more difficult. Wave after wave of attacks all ended in failure. King tiers were king tiers, after all. The gap was not something that could be filled with mere numbers. After Tuoba Dong and Yuing had rested for a long enough time, they began to issue a challenge. One chose Yuing, while the other chose Dan Gu. These were again two intense and exciting battles. The battle continued for a whole half-day's time before the victor was finally decided. Yuing won, while Tuoba Dong lost to Yang Lin. This time, among the 9 great king tiers, the immortal realm had occupied a total of 7 places. Taking advantage of the fact that both Yuing and Yang Lin were weary from a long period of battle, others grouped together to fight them again. However, a wounded tiger was still a tiger. It was definitely not something that could be defeated by a few dogs working together. The battles continued. Aside from Ling Han, Qi Huangji, and the other kings among kings, the other 5 battle platforms were all very intense. To obtain a placement for themselves, they all used their ultimate moves, broadening horizons of their spectators. 2 days' time passed very fast. Dan Gu became the first king tier to be completely disqualified, and after another few hours, Yuing became the second. This time, the dust had settled, and there was indeed no doubt the candidates for the 9 kings were confirmed. It was impossible anyone would be able to shake the positions of these 9 people. Even a heavenly body tier like Sui Quan could only bow his head here. Being weakened to the level of the mountain river tier, he was completely no match for the king tiers of the young generation. Was that really the case? Ling Han smiled faintly. He was still waiting, and when there was about an hour left, he nodded at the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden. The Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden understood his signal, and ascended onto the platform with a leap. What in the world is going on? Everyone was shocked. There was actually someone who dared to issue a challenge at this time? Furthermore, the one being challenged was actually Ling Hanha, was a king among kings. The Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden made a move, and a pair of phoenix's wings spread open. Fiery flames blazed. Ah! Ling Han screamed out, instantly falling off the platform. Fuck! When they saw this scene, everyone could feel a cold sweat. She hasn't even touched you, and you're already screaming? That was a little too fake, wasn't it? It was obviously done deliberately. No one was stupid in this place, and immediately guessed that Ling Han had lost deliberately to the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden. Furthermore, at this time, the time limit of 3 days was about up. Then, Ling Han's intention was extremely obvious, wanted to guarantee a place of king tier for this woman. However, this was a chance. When they saw the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden replace Ling, everyone felt a moment of elation. But the problem now was the majority of them had used up their 3 chances of challenging, and now could only watch from the sidelines. On the other hand, there were still some people who had not used all their 3 chances, but their abilities were obviously much weaker. That was why they were willing to become mere spectators. The reason they had come here was mainly to observe the battles between prodigies so that they could gain appreciation and inspiration. They ascended the platform to battle, but the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden was no weakling. Though she had not cultivated to pinnacle level, once she awoke her Cloud Phoenix bloodline, she could forcefully gain the battle prowess of the early stage of the pinnacle level, so she was considerably powerful. She firmly occupied this platform that she had obtained through little difficulty, guarding the gift that Ling Han had given her. Meanwhile, Ling Han was standing underneath the platform. He was waiting for time to pass so that he could issue a challenge again. After he fell off the platform, he realized that there was a black-colored line on his hand, and a black-colored aura was enshrouding him, causing him to be unable to move. After 15 minutes, the black-colored aura disappeared, but the black line did not. Obviously, the black-colored aura forced him to be able to continue challenging only after 15 minutes, while the black line symbolized that he had lost once. If 3 lines appeared, he would no longer be able to ascend the platform and battle. Ling Han looked towards Ao Ziyun, and broke into a grin. Fuck. Ao Ziyun instantly cursed internally. He had not even finished the thought when he saw that Ling Han had already shot upwards, and was now standing right in front of him. At this moment, the anguish in Ao Ziyun's heart was indescribably colossal. He had guarded his platform until now with so much difficulty, and it looked like he was just about to succeed, yet all of a sudden, he had met such a demon like Ling Han. You are really too mean. You deliberately lost to your own woman so you could get an additional placement. Yet, unfortunately, Ling Han had that type of power. Fuck. 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 Thoughts streamed through Ao Ziyun's head rapidly, and he immediately aimed to leap off the platform. There was still more than 15 minutes from the deadline of 3 days at present, and he had only lost once. Then, if he immediately admitted defeat and waited 15 minutes, he would be able to make a move on the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden and regain his placement. Ho ho, what's all the rush? Ling Han moved. With a single move, Ao Ziyun was sent flying backwards. Fu *K. A muscle twitched in Ao Ziyun's cheek. You are too ruthless, aren't you? Can't I even choose not to fight you? I forfeit, he called out loudly. To be blessed by fortune, he did not mind losing a little face. None of my business. Ling Han shook his head, and shot out a punch at Ao Ziyun. If I want to beat you, I will. Pung, pung, pung. Ao Ziyun had no choice but to parry, and had completely no chance to get off the platform. He wanted to lose, but he couldn't even do that. Everyone couldn't help but be amused from watching, and felt that the two-realm prodigy gathering this time round was finally more interesting than in the past. Chapter 1306 Celestial Chi. Ao Ziyun ***** wanted to lose, and wanted to rush off the platform, yet Ling Han would keep blocking him. The latter's strength was much too powerful, and he could effectively block him. How could he play around with him like that? Ao Ziyun was almost close to tears. What grudge or enmity did they have between them? I'll hand over my placement to you, all right? Oh, since you want to go down so much, I am not an unreasonable person, so I'll send you off. Ling Han suddenly shot out a foot, and delivered a kick right onto Ao Ziyun's behind. Peng, this guy instantly fell off the platform. At first, Ao Ziyun was at a loss, but he finally realized that Ling Han was finally willing to let him off. Involuntarily, he was ecstatic, but after a moment, his expression changed drastically. There was only 6 or 7 minutes before the time limit of 3 days. Which also meant that without waiting for him to issue another challenge, the time limit for 3 days would come. Ling Han, we are irreconcilable, he roared furiously, his hatred boosted to the extreme. My ears are working very well, so there is no need for you to shout so loudly. Ling Han waved a hand dismissively. He was naturally not going to take Ao Ziyun's threat to heart. Ao Ziyun raised his spear levelly, wanting nothing more than to rush onto the platform and fight another 300 battles with Ling Han. This time, he swore that he would use all his ultimate moves, even the forbidden great move that would reduce his lifespan, on Ling Han. Otherwise, he would definitely be unable to swallow this fury. However, a mysterious power had imprisoned him, forcing him to be capable of only standing there. He was completely incapable of taking a step at all. Wang, not long afterwards, a white light appeared from the 9 platforms at the same time, enshrouding the platforms completely. This meant that those standing outside were no longer capable of ascending these platforms. The time limit of 3 days had reached. Ah! Ao Ziyun roared in fury at the heavens, but it was completely useless. Boom! On the platforms, multiple auras descended. They were all milky white in color, and would make one feel relaxed and carefree. This is celestial chi, Small Tower suddenly spoke up. What? Ling Han exclaimed in surprise. Though it's not much in the celestial realm, but in the immortal realm, you would be able to fill a hole in your regulations and greatly increase your battle prowess, Small Tower said. A thought flashed in Ling Han's head. If he wanted to break through into the celestial realm, he needed to grasp both powers of creating and destroying a world, and whether it was the immortal realm or the netherworld, they were both incomplete in this aspect. Both only possessed a part of the regulations. Now, what this celestial chi was filling in, was it the regulations of the netherworld that he was missing? If that was the case, then this celestial chi was really not the slightest bit valuable to the celestial realm, but to beings of the immortal realm and the netherworld, this was a precious treasure. It would help them perfect their regulations and truly cultivate to perfection. The clash of the two realms, or even the merging, was that truly the perfect world? Innumerable thoughts streamed through Ling Han's head, but he set everything aside at this time, and began to absorb the celestial chi to improve himself. With the demonic power source, he could only possess the aura of the netherworld. It did not mean that he could grasp the regulations of the netherworld. Thus, he would take this chance to endlessly perfect himself and advance towards that perfect, flawless Tao. Small Tower did not speak any further to avoid disturbing Ling Han. All the pores on Ling Han's body were fully opened as he absorbed this so-called celestial chi. With the completion of his regulations, there was actually a considerable boost to his cultivation level. It had boosted his peak stage of consummate level to perfection. At this point, if he did not break through to the pinnacle level, his cultivation level could not possibly be increased further. However, as the regulations of the two realms were perfected, his battle prowess was endlessly spiking. The use of regulations was initially a part of battle prowess, and following the increase of cultivation level, the importance of regulations would become gradually greater and greater. Ling Han's power could surpass 6 stars, but his battle prowess was only about slightly over 6 stars, and that was because the regulations he had grasped had not yet caught up. The time was limited. He could not possibly cultivate each cultivation level to perfection again, he could only make as much use of whatever time he had as he could. There was only 3 days. Everyone was sitting in cross-legged positions. Not everyone knew what the celestial chi meant, but they obviously knew this was greatly beneficial to themselves. Naturally, they would absorb as much as they possibly could. Time passed very quickly. Ling Han only felt as if his tendons, bones, blood, and flesh had all experienced a sliver of change. Though he could not really say what this change was, he understood that he was progressing in a better direction. And even in the territory of rising from the ashes of the indestructible heaven scroll, Ling Han had gained new understanding. He was certain that if he could continue to bathe in this celestial chi, the time that he needed to take to comprehend rising from the ashes would be shrunk in half. Unfortunately, this was too precious, and he only had a mere 3 days' time. His godly bones were increasingly crystalline. They were obviously forged from a material akin to gold, but if one looked closer, they were half-transparent and as translucent as crystal. They exuded streams of light, with dense divine patterns on them. That was the manifestation of the indestructible heaven scroll. However, aside from Ling Han, no one could understand what they actually meant. Now that he had simultaneously grasped the regulations of 2 realms, even the indestructible heaven scroll had become stronger. Wang, the light that enshrouded the platforms vanished, and the time limit of 3 days had arrived. Ling Han wished to continue. The time of 3 days was far from enough for him to recultivate all his cultivation levels to perfection. Unfortunately, he could no longer continue. If he wanted to again be boosted by good fortune, he could only emerge victorious among the 9 kings, and become the king among kings. At this moment, he was filled with motivation, and his resolve was incomparably sturdy. Xiao, Xiao, Xiao. The 9 people on the platforms were all sent flying into the forest. The second round of battle was about to begin. Ling Han first found the heavenly phoenix divine maiden. Though she was also at the level of a top-grade prodigy, she was definitely not on the same level as the 9 great king tiers. If she was targeted by any of them, it would mean big trouble for her. After the two of them reunited, they turned to look at the mountain summit. It was very simple to become the final king among kings. There was a platform on the mountaintop. 3 days later, the person standing on top of that platform would be the final victor. I won't join in on this, so I will wait for you here, the heavenly phoenix divine maiden said. She knew that if she continued to follow Ling Han, it was inevitable that she would distract Ling Han. Ling Han thought for a moment. Then, he nodded, and replied, "All right." The heavenly phoenix divine maiden tugged at him, and gave him a light hug. "Be careful." She was deeply rueful. Based on her understanding, it should be she that was protecting Ling Han in their relationship, but now, it was Ling Han who was taking care of her instead, which was both an unfamiliar and sweet experience for her. Ling Han though took the chance to embrace her slender waist and gave her a kiss, instantly causing this fierce woman to lose her wits. At first, she still wanted to resist, but very soon, she was completely kissed dizzy. Her slender body turned soft like water, and collapsed into Ling Han's arms. She was as tender as water, graceful and exquisite. Ling Han's heart throbbed, but his, young and inexperienced, body did not have the slightest reaction, and he gritted his teeth in irritation. Rising from the ashes, he had to complete learning it in the shortest time possible. Ling Han strode forwards, and the heavenly phoenix divine maiden saw him off from behind him, her eyes dazed. The mountain river forest was not big, and the peak was only about 3,000 meters tall. It would not take too much time for even an ordinary person to climb to the peak of the mountain, what more when it was an immortal. Very soon, Ling Han had arrived at the summit. At this time, the other 7 had all reached their positions, but the battle had not started. "You're finally here." Huangji's eyes lit up, while the red sun above his head suddenly doubled in size. His aura increased by 100-fold. He laughed loudly. "All of you can attack together." Chapter 1307 Huangji's Power. The Stone Emperor and North Emperor were completely unfazed, and they merely sneered in reply. They were all kings among king tiers, so it had only ever been them telling others to attack them together. How could they gang up on someone themselves? "Trash, move aside." Huangji chided softly. He threw a punch that transformed into 4 bursts of flames and shot toward Faceless, Yang Lin, the Cloud Maiden, and Tuoba Dong. Even his netherworld companion had become one of his targets. Faceless and the 3 others didn't dare to underestimate this attack. Some of them tried to dodge it, while others tried to block it. In any case, they couldn't just stand there and do nothing. Huangji roared with laughter, throwing another punch and then another. The red sun above his head flashed with each punch that he threw as if he were a sun god. Faceless and the others roared loudly as they tried to withstand Huangji's attacks. However, Huangji was far too powerful, so they had no choice but to team up to battle against him. This was an extremely interesting scenario. 3 of them were immortal realm beings, while one of them was a netherworld being. Yet, at this moment, they were teaming up to battle against a single netherworld elite. No matter how one looked at this, it would seem incredibly odd and inharmonious. However, they were truly left with no choice but to team up. Huangji was far too powerful, so much so that he had already transcended the level of ordinary king tiers and reached the level of a king among king tiers. If this were in the outside world, perhaps they could still use the advantage of their cultivation level to achieve victory. However, this was the mountain river forest, so they could only battle against each other at the same cultivation level. As such, they could only rely on a weight of numbers if they wanted to achieve victory. However, if this battle were truly taken to the outside world, Huangji would be an elite who had already reached the heavenly body tier. That being the case, only the Stone Emperor and North Emperor would be able to battle against him. Ha ha ha. Huangji's black hair hung loosely over his shoulders, and a peculiar image of the galaxy and stars was reflected in his eyes. The red sun above his head flashed as he continued to throw punches at the 4 king tiers. The 4 king tiers didn't dare to face his attacks head-on, so all they could do was continue to dodge and evade. Meanwhile, they would also launch some counterattacks between his punches. Useless! Huangji shouted in disdain. In his eyes, only Ling Han, the North Emperor, and the Stone Emperor were worthy of being his opponents. The other Alsorans were only worthy of being swept aside. However, how could Faceless and the others bring themselves to admit defeat? They all started to unleash their most powerful techniques, embroiling themselves in an intense battle with Huangji. Rising clouds, true dragons appear from the 1,000 peaks, the Cloud Maiden cried softly. She was the first among them to unleash her most powerful attack. As she spread her hands, numerous azure mountains materialized into existence, all of them shrouded in clouds and mists. Amid this range of azure mountains, the growl of a dragon could be heard. It was as if a true dragon lay amid these mountains. True dragons were beings that soared through the heavens and were feared all over the world. Wang! A formidable pressure instantly swept through the surroundings. It was as if this woman were the paragon of the world whom everyone could only regard with awe and veneration. Flowing water dying tunes, 1,000-tone obliteration. Faceless strummed his guqin frantically, the melody that rose from it as quick as war drums. Everyone's heart involuntarily beat faster as if about to forcefully expand and explode. At the same time, bursts of sound waves transformed into flowing water that looked harmless, yet were actually brimming with killing intent. These streams of water flowed toward Huangji. Meanwhile, Yang Lin retrieved an ancient-looking umbrella that was already severely damaged on one half. This ruined the umbrella's beauty. In any case, he opened the umbrella, and it suddenly seemed as if he had become the center of the universe. He was especially radiant and eye-catching. "Eternal sky, I shall be eternal," he roared. A brilliant glow burst from the ancient umbrella, and then transformed into an ancient Buddha that radiated with golden light. The ancient Buddha swiped its palm at Huangji. This was Yang Lin's damaged saint tool. In the outside world, it was even capable of suppressing heavenly body tier elites. Tuoba Dong gritted his teeth before aggressively striking his own chest. He spat out a mouthful of golden blood, and shouted, "The Lion King roars, the world shall prostrate." He then unleashed a violent roar. Pa, pa, pa. The space surrounding him was shattered as the shock wave of his roar surged toward Huangji. The 4 king tiers all unleashed their respective trump cards. At this moment, even Huangji didn't dare to underestimate them. If they were battling one-on-one, he could easily defeat any one of the 4 king tiers. However, he was being ganged up on at this moment, so his advantage over them was already extremely slim. The 4 king tiers were more so unleashing their trump cards at him, so the pressure on him was naturally even greater. If he slipped up, even he would have to suffer a grudging defeat. Wonderful, wonderful, things are finally getting more interesting now. Huangji laughed loudly as his fighting spirit soared through the sky. Under normal circumstances, it would be impossible to battle against 4 other king tiers at once. Thus, he was extremely excited at this moment. However, that's far from enough to defeat me. He threw another punch that was simple yet violent and direct. Boom! This wasn't any normal punch, and it transformed into a sea of boundless flames. An azure dragon slithered out from the Cloud Maiden's azure mountain range, and this dragon was the first to near the sea of flames. However, as the azure dragon dashed over, its body was gradually incinerated by the blazing sea of flames. It eventually turned into nothingness after arriving almost 1 meter before Huangji. Faceless flowing water attack also evaporated over half a meter before Huangji. Yang Lin's attack fared better than both the Cloud Maidens and Faceless. His ancient umbrella was a saint tool, after all, and the ancient Buddha that it transformed into was able to break through the sea of flames and launch a strike at Huangji. However, it was coincidentally met by Huangji's fist, which easily smashed it into pieces. Tuoba Dong's Lion King roar shattered space, yet it was forcefully ground to a halt almost 1 meter before Huangji's body. It couldn't advance a single inch further. The 4 king tiers had unleashed their trump cards together, yet their efforts were proven to be futile. Trash should just move aside. Huangji followed up with a punch that transformed into 4 flaming tigers that charged toward Faceless, Tuoba Dong, and the others. Pung, pung, pung. The 4 king tiers were all weakened after unleashing their trump cards, so how could they withstand Huangji's counterattack? They were instantly sent flying. Fortunately, they were king tiers just like Huangji, so they only suffered a minor amount of damage. The Cloud Maiden's right sleeve was completely obliterated, revealing her smooth, jade-like arm. Meanwhile, Yang Lin slid back 9 meters, his face as white as a sheet. He was barely able to stop himself from vomiting blood. Tuoba Dong stumbled back 17 steps, leaving a deep footprint in the ground with each step that he took. His golden mane was disheveled as it billowed in the air. Pa! The cloth around Faceless' face was torn into shreds, revealing a featureless face. Gasp! Even though they were all young king tiers, they still couldn't help but gasp upon seeing Faceless' true appearance. What kind of person was he? His face was like a blank canvas, and it was completely devoid of any features. In fact, he didn't even have hair or ears. He simply had a featureless head. If it weren't for the fact that his clothes had a clear front and back, it would have been genuinely impossible to determine which side was his face simply by looking at his head. How did this person speak? Faceless. He was genuinely faceless. Faceless sighed softly. He clearly didn't have a mouth, yet everyone could sense that he was indeed sighing. He unsheathed a sword from his guqin and shook it slightly, saying, "I never imagined that this moment would arrive so soon." What's this? A hint of curiosity appeared on Huangji's face. Apart from cultivation, few things in the world could capture his interest. However, he had never seen or heard of such a tribe before, one where its members didn't even have a face. Shua! Faceless swung his sword, not at Huangji, but at his own face. Pooh! Blood instantly sprayed into the air. This. Was he self-harming and attempting suicide because others had seen his ugliness? No. Faceless swung his sword several times, carving several bloody holes into his face. It was as if he were drawing on a canvas, and a pair of eyes, a nose, and a mouth instantly appeared on his face. Of course, these features were merely represented by bloody holes. However, what happened next was absolutely astonishing. The bloody holes rapidly transformed, a pair of eyes appearing, a straight nose arching up, a mouth splitting open, and 2 rows of teeth appearing in the mouth. Hair also started to grow from his head at an astonishing speed, as did his ears. After just a few seconds, a complete person had already appeared before them. He was an incredibly handsome man. In fact, it could be said that he was a breathtakingly handsome man. He was so handsome that even other men would be jealous of his appearance. However, the only emotion that the 7 king tiers felt at this moment was shock. This was because Faceless' aura was also rising explosively at this moment. It had already surpassed the level of ordinary king tiers, and it was currently surging toward the level of king among kings. This is referring to ancient Chinese umbrellas, not the modern type of umbrellas. Chapter 1308 Faceless Tribe. What on earth is going on? He simply carved a face, and his strength is now rising explosively? I remember now. Yang Lin suddenly exclaimed. He pointed at Faceless, and said, "You're from the Faceless tribe." The Faceless tribe. That's an ancient divine tribe, the Cloud Maiden exclaimed in astonishment. There was a stunned look on her beautiful face. Ancient Divine Tribe. These 3 words represented mystery and power. If someone was linked to these 3 words, they would definitely possess the ability to stir commotion throughout an entire region. The 9 Snake Tribe and Faceless Tribe. 2 ancient divine tribes had now appeared. Ling Han raised his hand, and asked, Can you tell us a bit about the Faceless Tribe? Faceless smiled faintly, and said, I'll tell you guys myself. He looked at Huangji, his aura surging like the formidable waves of the sea. In fact, his aura was almost on par with Huangji's at this moment. Members of the Faceless Tribe are born without a face, and this is a technique invented by our ancient ancestors. It allows members of our tribe to advance rapidly, and it also bestows them with a battle prowess that far surpasses others at the same cultivation level. Simply put, we all have the potential to become king tiers. However, because our bloodlines are all different, the limits of our capabilities also differ. Moreover, the longer that we remain faceless, the more beneficial it is to our cultivation. When we're faceless, power will continue to gather in our body. This power will only be unleashed when we eventually grow our facial features. Faceless gave a simple description of the Faceless Tribe. To summarize his words, the more faceless one was, the more powerful their bloodline would become. Thus, it would be best if they only grew a face and unleashed their accumulated power after breaking through to the Genesis tier. If they did that, perhaps they would soar into the celestial realm straight away. In any case, none of them understood the secret technique used by the Faceless Tribe. However, they now understood that the process of growing a face would allow one to become many-fold more powerful. It was no wonder that his aura was almost on par with Huangji's at this moment. He had now become the 5th king among kings. Interesting. Yang Lin laughed loudly as he tossed an alchemical pill into his mouth. His aura also started to rise explosively, instantly reaching the same level as Faceless. He shook his ancient umbrella, and said, Don't forget me, Yang Lin. He was someone who had been blessed by the fortune of heaven and had received the recognition of a saint tool. Who could match his luck? He was destined to become king. What kind of divine pill was that? How is its effect so remarkable? Everyone was astounded. Being a king tier signified that one had already reached the peak stage of the pinnacle level. Thus, it would be incredibly difficult if one wanted to raise their battle prowess even a tiny bit more. If one wanted to become a king among kings, they would have to practice a supreme secret technique. For example, one would have to practice the indestructible heaven scroll or comprehend the secrets of heavenly tribulation and gain the ability to wield the lightning of tribulation. Or perhaps one could be like Faceless, they could be born into an ancient divine tribe, and thus possess a tremendously powerful bloodline. After becoming a king tier, alchemical pills would also become completely useless. Even if an alchemical pill could elevate an ordinary cultivator's battle prowess by 2 stars, it would still be completely useless when ingested by a king tier. It wouldn't even retain 1/10 of its effect. However, Yang Lin was the embodiment of luck. He had even received the recognition of a saint tool, so would it be surprising if he had obtained some ancient godly medicine that could raise his battle prowess above the level of king tier? Of course, this effect was only temporary. Huangji laughed loudly as he turned to the Cloud Maiden and to Obadong, and said, Do you two have secret techniques to elevate your strength? If you do, then hurry up and use it. If not, then piss the hell off. The Cloud Maiden and Tuoba Dong both smiled bitterly. They were both invincible king tiers on their own respective planet, with even supreme prodigies not having the right to challenge them to a duel. Here, however, they were the ones being chided and told to fuck off. However, there was nothing they could do about this. They were still a fair distance from becoming king among kings. This gulf in strength wasn't due to their cultivation level, but rather due to their secret techniques and bloodlines. In other words, this had nothing to do with their effort and talent. The two of them retreated to the side. The battle that was about to take place wasn't one that they could participate in. 5 of you? That seems about right. There was a haughty look in Huangji's eyes as he swept his gaze over them. Boom! The red sun above his head released a blinding glow, and he roared, "After crushing all of you, you can watch me ascend the throne." It was as if he had become mad, and he actually chose to attack Ling Han, the North Emperor, Faceless, and the others all at once. He was challenging 5 kings among kings at the same time. If he wasn't mad, then what was he? Ling Han humphed as he replied with a punch. However, this punch wasn't merely targeted at Huangji. Instead, it also split into 5 separate attacks that surged toward the 5 other Supreme King tiers. Melee? I like it. The Stone Emperor shuddered, and he instantly grew to 9 meters in height. The height of the others didn't even reach his knees. He had instantly become a giant, and he also launched indiscriminate attacks at the 5 other king tiers. The North Emperor laughed heartily, and he slashed with his saber, sending countless bursts of frosty light into the surroundings. Faceless and Yang Lin weren't willing to appear weak either. The former drew his sword, and the latter shook his ancient umbrella, both of them launching attacks at the 5 other king tiers. The Cloud Maiden and Tuoba Dong were both astounded by the scene before them. Fighting like this was incredibly dangerous as one would have to withstand the vicious attacks of 5 Supreme King tiers at the same time. If they were involved in such a battle, perhaps they would be riddled with wounds after only 10 exchanges. At that time, they would have no choice but to retreat and admit defeat. At any rate, fighting like this revealed the differences in their power very quickly, even though they were all Supreme King tiers. Wounds gradually started to appear on Faceless and Yang Lin's body. Blood flowed freely, and their battle prowess also started to drop rapidly. This was expected. Faceless had only just ascended to this level, so it was only natural that he hadn't become a genuine Supreme King tier just yet. Meanwhile, Yang Lin had only reached this level after ingesting an alchemical pill, so he obviously couldn't control the newfound power in his body perfectly. However, Ling Han and the others were just as powerful as before. Moreover, they weren't planning to relent any time soon either. Pang, pang, pang. It wasn't long before Yang Lin and Faceless were sent flying. However, they wouldn't need to feel dejected about losing here. After all, this melee-style battle meant that they were being attacked by 5 other Supreme King tiers at any one time. How many people could withstand this? As the Cloud Maiden and 3 others watched on, they couldn't help but feel admiration for the 4 king tiers who were still locked in a fierce battle. The 4 of them were clearer stronger than the rest. However, only one of them would emerge as a true king among kings, and that would be the person who eventually ascended the throne. The others would all become stepping stones. It mattered little how powerful or talented they were. If they lost against someone at the same cultivation level, they could only become green leaves that accentuated the existence of the red flower. Only one person could become king. As for the others, they could at most be pseudo-kings. Who would become the genuine king among kings? Would it be Ling Han? Or the North Emperor? Or maybe the Stone Emperor? Perhaps Huangji? No one knew how this battle would end. The battle between the 4 of them was far too intense. However, even though it was so intense, they still somehow managed to maintain their watertight defenses. It was as if they could go on like this for tens or even hundreds of years. However, was there this much time for them to waste? If they couldn't determine the victor in 3 days, they would all be eliminated. Ling Han was the first to stop attacking, saying, "If we continue like this, we won't determine a victor even after 100 years. Humph. I've got to admit that you 3 ants are indeed quite strong," Huangji said. "However, there's still a long way before you reach my level." Although he admitted that Ling Han and the others were strong, he was still just as haughty and arrogant as before. "Then how should we determine the victor?" the Stone Emperor asked. "We'll draw lots and hold 2 one-on-one battles. The victors of these battles will then fight against each other. The person who wins this battle will be the final victor," Ling Han said. Although the melee had appeared extremely dangerous, the fact that it was a melee also meant that none of them had placed their full power into their attacks. After all, they still had to be mindful of their defenses. As a result, it was actually harder to defeat one another and determine a final victor. For example, there would be no time for them to accumulate their power and launch a powerful attack during a melee. Fine. Huangji was the first person to agree to this suggestion. At this moment, he had already accepted the fact that these 3 immortal realm beings had the right to battle against him. Only by fighting one-on-one would they truly be able to find the strongest among them. The Stone Emperor and North Emperor exchanged a glance before both nodding their head. Chapter 1309 Battle of the Strongest Physiques. They drew lots, and the result was Ling Han versus the Stone Emperor and Huangji versus the North Emperor. They didn't speak any nonsense, and the 4 of them immediately began to do battle. "Human, eat my fist." The rock spirit launched a fist at Ling Han. His fist was larger than a wok lid, and it looked as if it were formed from jade, with swirls of light glimmering on its surface. However, one definitely couldn't make the mistake of thinking that his fist was brittle. In reality, he possessed the bloodline of a rock spirit, and thus his most outstanding quality was his sturdy physique. His physique was as tough as godly metal of the same level. Thus, the Stone Emperor preferred engaging in close-quarters combat. In the past, he had battled against a king tier at the same cultivation level, and he had ruthlessly smashed him into a pile of broken flesh with only 10 punches. If he hadn't shown mercy, even his opponent's divine sense would have been obliterated. Ling Han laughed loudly as he replied with a punch of his own. Pang! Their fists collided, releasing a burst of devastating light that easily tore space apart, forming numerous black swirls in the air. It was as if even space were about to shatter. Such an event wasn't impossible. After all, the Mountain River tier was the highest cultivation level in this place, so they were all equivalent to Saint Kings in the outside world. If Saint Kings so desired, tearing space apart wouldn't be a difficult task. A look of astonishment spread across the Stone Emperor's face. Ling Han had exchanged a blow with him, yet even his skin hadn't cracked, to say nothing of his bones shattering. He knew that Ling Han was powerful, but close-quarters combat was his forte. Take the North Emperor, for example. The North Emperor was just as powerful as him, yet he still wouldn't dare to engage in close-quarters combat with him. Prodigies were naturally aware of their own strengths and weaknesses. Taking advantage of one's own strengths while avoiding one's own weaknesses was the best way to go. He had noticed that Ling Han liked to use his fists, so he had hoped that he would be matched up against him. He wanted to experience Ling Han's fist techniques. However, he had never imagined that Ling Han's fists would actually be so solid and powerful. Wonderful! The Stone Emperor was extremely excited, and his fighting spirit burned even stronger than before. Just then, he had merely been fooling around. Now, however, he was going to unleash his true power. Ling Han shook his hand, and said, "Few people can exchange a punch with me and not have their bones shatter. You're fairly strong." You stole the words right out of my mouth. The Stone Emperor charged forward, throwing a flurry of punches, and saying, "Human, please don't cower. Exchange 10,000 punches with me. Whoever cowers is a little dog." His iron-like fists were invincible, and he had never felt sated when exchanging blows with others. Thus, he was afraid that Ling Han wouldn't continue to exchange blows with him and sate his appetite. So, he spoke to provoke Ling Han first. Cold sweat involuntarily formed on Ling Han's forehead. How old is this stone emperor? He actually uttered the words, little dog. He shook his head with a chuckle, and said, fine. However, don't cry if you lose. You think I'm afraid of you? The stone emperor shouted. You're not. Good. The two of them continued to exchange blows, not using any fanciful moves. All they used was their two fists. Faceless and the others all grimaced upon seeing this. Were these two people savages? How could ordinary people possess such terrifying physiques? The power of cultivators was limited. If one placed 70% of their power into offense, then they would only have 30% of their power left for defense. However, judging by Ling Han's and the Stone Emperor's ferocious attacks, they had clearly placed 100% of their power into offense. In other words, the physique of them two was freakishly powerful. They didn't need to use origin power to protect themselves. Could people at the same cultivation level wound them? Faceless and the others exchanged a glance. They felt that power alone wouldn't be able to breach Ling Han and the Stone Emperor's defenses. They had already exchanged 1,000 or so punches, yet neither of them had suffered from broken bones or even broken skin. They believed that one would have to use the regulations of flames, ice, or other elements to melt or restrict their physiques first. Regulations were an innate part of battle prowess, and merely using power to exchange blows like Ling Han and the Stone Emperor was the fighting method of foolish brutes. Generally speaking, elites wouldn't stoop to such a level. However, these two supreme king tiers were enjoying themselves immensely. The smile of the Stone Emperor's face was like a blooming flower. He was feeling absolutely delighted at this moment. Never had anyone engaged in such a hearty battle with him before. His impression of Ling Han grew better by the second, and he felt that he could completely become friends with him, even though he was a human. Human, I'm going to unleash more of my battle prowess, he said. It was clear that neither of them would be able to breach the other's physique if they merely exchanged blows using their raw power. I was just about to suggest this, Ling Han said with a smile. Bright jade technique, the Stone Emperor roared. His two fists had been as smooth as jade before, yet at this moment, they suddenly became completely transparent. Streaks of divine patterns instantly materialized and covered his two fists. Meanwhile, the blue divine pattern on Ling Han's fist lit up. Z, Z, Z. Lightning crackled around his fists. This wasn't ordinary lightning, but divine lightning. Fuck. The Stone Emperor was just about to launch his fist, yet he immediately pulled back. Even he was apprehensive of the divine lightning from heavenly tribulation. You don't want to fight anymore? Ling Han asked with a smile. No, we'll continue, the Stone Emperor said stubbornly. He strode forward and threw an aggressive punch. Ling Han replied with a punch of his own. Pang! Their fists collided, and the collision this time was even more devastating. This was because they had both unleashed the power of regulations. This was not only a collision of power, but also a collision of regulations. Z. Lightning arced up the Stone Emperor's fist and toward his arm. Pa, 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 pa. The sleeve on his arm instantly disintegrated into ashes. When the lightning traveled up to his shoulder and tried to course through his body, the treasured robe that he was wearing suddenly lit up and prevented the lightning from traveling any further. Ling Han and the Stone Emperor both retreated. After unleashing their secret techniques, their battle prowess was naturally many-fold more powerful than before. The Stone Emperor raised his hand, only to see that his jade-like fist was fractured and bleeding azure blood. This blood smelled especially fragrant. This was his blood. However, because he was a rock spirit, he was largely a rock spirit, but just not as pure as his father. His blood was actually an extremely rare spiritual liquid. This was an astonishingly beneficial tonic. The Stone Emperor was stunned. Although he had been wounded before, this was the first time he had been wounded by the fists of someone at the same cultivation level as him. Fuck. This human's fists are actually tougher than my fists. He looked at Ling Han, only to see that his fists were still intact and unscathed. Ling Han sniffed, then stared at the Stone Emperor's hand, and said, don't waste the spiritual liquid. Use a vial to collect it. The Stone Emperor's face scrunched up in anger, and he shouted, "That's my blood. I know. That's why I'm telling you not to waste it. It's flowed out anyway, so you might as well give it to me." Ling Han cracked a harmless smile. "You bastard," the Stone Emperor shouted in fury. There was a flash of light, and his fist immediately started to heal at a surprisingly quick speed. He was the descendant of a rock spirit, and thus he possessed a sturdy physique as well as an astonishing recovery ability. "Come again," he roared as he waved his fists. He refused to believe that he, a rock spirit, would lose to a human in close-quarters combat. "As you wish. However, if you lose, you've got to give me a vial of spiritual liquid," Ling Han said with a smile. "That's my blood," the Stone Emperor stressed. "I know. Why are you being so stingy? If you want, I can also give some of my blood to you," Ling Han said casually. "Fine. If you can defeat me, I'll give you a vial of my spiritual liquid." The Stone Emperor was furious, and his robe that was knitted from phoenix blood true gold started to glow as he swung his fists. Not only could this robe increase his defenses, but it could even raise his power by a certain amount. After all, this was a robe that was knitted from saintly material. Even though it was suppressed to the mountain river tier at this moment, it was still incredibly powerful. Chapter 13 10 Gold Crushing 3 Punches. "Huh, you said it yourself, so you'd better keep your promise," Ling Han said with a hearty laugh. "You can say that after you win," the Stone Emperor said sternly. He activated several secret techniques, elevating his battle prowess by another level. Ling Han was unfazed by this, and he directly unleashed Heaven's Might. Wang! As Heaven's Might swept outward, the Stone Emperor's battle prowess instantly dropped by 2 stars. This was absolutely terrifying. What kind of concept was having one's battle prowess drop by 2 stars? This was equivalent to being weakened by 100 times. Their battle prowess was already very close to begin with, yet one of them was now weakened by 100 times. Was this still a fair battle? Ling Han threw a punch, and the Stone Emperor was instantly sent flying. Pung, 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 pung. The Stone Emperor crushed at least 100 gigantic trees before eventually coming to a stop. Right now, his body was hanging off of a gigantic tree. Xiao! His 9-meter-tall body immediately started to shrink. After a short while, he returned to his original size of 3 inches. He shook his head vigorously, and only by doing this did he finally regain his senses. He couldn't help but feel stunned. His opponent actually possessed a secret technique that could affect his battle prowess. This was incredibly astonishing. Moreover, this secret technique hadn't weakened him by 10% or 20%, but by a whopping 2 stars. One had to realize that even the gulf between a Supreme King tier and an ordinary King tier was less than 1 star. Before Ling Han, even Supreme King tiers wouldn't have the right to call themselves King tiers. So, how could he possibly fight him? "How powerful," the Stone Emperor said solemnly. Was that Heaven's Might? It had to be, because even the might of true dragons can't affect members of the rock spirit lineage. His father was a rock spirit who had developed intelligence and eventually become a saint, and thus he was on the same level as true dragons. That being the case, even true dragons wouldn't be able to affect his battle prowess. Ling Han smiled faintly, and said, "That's right, I unleashed Heaven's Might. Little Stone, do you still want to continue? If not, then obediently hand me a vial of spiritual liquid. Just Heaven's Might alone won't be enough." The Stone Emperor shook his head before charging at Ling Han again. A misty light enveloped his body, and he said, "I've activated a secret technique of my tribe. For the next 2 hours, no immaterial secret technique will be able to penetrate my defenses. If I can't defeat you during this time, then I'll gladly admit defeat." This time, he didn't enlarge his body anymore. Instead, he chose to remain at his original size of 3 inches tall. However, when he swung his fist, his power all converged to a single point, making it even more destructive and devastating than before. Ling Han unleashed Heaven's might as he replied with a strike of his own. Sure enough, Heaven's might was no longer able to affect the Stone Emperor. It seemed as if he wasn't lying. He was genuinely invulnerable to immaterial secret techniques for the next 2 hours. "Heh, you want to defeat me within the next 2 hours?" Ling Han said with a loud laugh. This was a hilarious joke. He unleashed his fists at the Stone Emperor. A while ago, the Stone Emperor's fists had been as large as the lid of a well, yet at this moment, they were only as small as a fingernail. Compared to Ling Han's fists, they seemed completely insignificant. In fact, they seemed even more insignificant than an infant's fists. However, one would definitely receive a shocking surprise if they dared to underestimate these fists. One would naturally be at their strongest, and in their original form this was true for all beings. Now that he was in his original form, the Stone Emperor was undoubtedly more powerful than before. Not only that, but his power was also more concentrated and destructive. Pang! Their fists collided together, and the power of the Stone Emperor's punch all erupted at a single point, generating a devastating force. Crack! A cracking sound traveled out from Ling Han's body. His shoulder had actually been dislocated. Impressive! Ling Han said as he casually popped his shoulder back into place. The force of the Stone Emperor's strike had been terrifying. Although it hadn't shattered his godly bones, it had still affected him noticeably. Meanwhile, the jaw of the Stone Emperor had already dropped in shock. He was in his original form, yet his strike had only managed to dislocate Ling Han's shoulder. Holy, bloody fuck! Which of us is the rock spirit here? Human, you've proven yourself worthy enough for me to unleash the gold-crushing 3 punches, the Stone Emperor said solemnly. Is it very powerful? Ling Han asked with a smile. Among the spirits of the 5 elements, the gold element specializes in offense, while the stone element specializes in defense. My father was unwilling to resign himself to this fact, and thus he invented the gold-crushing 3 punches. He believes that the offensive power of rock spirits can even surpass that of gold spirits, the Stone Emperor said. He started to channel the might of the fist technique. Although he was only 3 inches tall, the aura that exuded from him was tremendous and astonishing. Rumble. The land around his body started to sink layer by layer. It was as if an invisible hand were forcing it down. He was merely channeling the might of his fist technique, yet it was already displaying such devastation. If one were struck by his fists head-on, just how utterly devastating would the destruction be? Do you dare to face my fists? The Stone Emperor asked. His voice was brimming with pride. This was a fist technique that had been invented by a saint. If it weren't for the fact that he also possessed the bloodline of rock spirits, there would be simply no way that he could have mastered this technique. However, it was also because of this fact that this fist technique was so tremendously powerful. Why would I not dare? Ling Han was also brimming with confidence. When battling against someone at the same cultivation level, who could breach his freakish physique? Even if someone could, they would only be able to do some minor damage. He could easily heal such damage by channeling the indestructible Heaven Scroll. Human, even if you lose this battle, you would have still won the right to become my friend, the Stone Emperor said with a chuckle. He appreciated people who dared to fight head-on against him. Wonderful. Ling Han said with a nod. He also appreciated the Stone Emperor's frank and forthright personality. First punch. The Stone Emperor dashed over before leaping high into the air. However, because of his small stature, his high leap only brought him to the level of Ling Han's face. He then unleashed a punch. Ling Han also threw a punch. Pang! A formidable power instantly erupted from the Stone Emperor's small body, sending Ling Han flying backward. Pang! Ling Han flew through the air for dozens of meters before finally crashing to the ground. The webbing between his hands' fingers was cracked and bloody. As expected of a technique invented by a saint. Impressive. Ling Han smiled faintly. This punch had finally managed to crack his defenses. However, this was about all it could do. It was still unable to damage his godly bones. After all, the toughness of his godly bones was on par with level 5 godly metal. Which mountain river tier cultivator could shatter such tough godly bones? Even power at the peak stage of the pinnacle level wouldn't be able to shatter his goldy bones. If one used violent flames to refine him, perhaps they could incinerate him after several days and nights. Second punch, the Stone Emperor roared. His right fist swung over again. Strangely, however, his fist expanded dozens of times in size, while his body remained completely unchanged. Pang! Ling Han was sent flying once again. This time, however, he performed a graceful tumble in the air and landed firmly on the ground. He shook his hand, and said, "This technique is indeed quite powerful. Even my hands are starting to hurt a little." The Stone Emperor roared as he threw another punch. This time, his fist transformed into a mountain. It was raised high above his head, and it was as if it could shatter even the sky. Bringing with it this domineering might, the fist ruthlessly smashed down at Ling Han. Even the North Emperor and Huangji's battle was affected by the shock waves of this devastating strike. Faceless and the others all shot back in retreat. The power of this strike had reached the peak stage of the low extreme of the Sun-Moon tier. This was absolutely astounding. One had to realize that those at the peak stage of the pinnacle level of the Mountain River tier could only compete against those at the early stage of the low extreme of the Sun-Moon tier. Yet, the Stone Emperor's battle prowess had elevated 3 stars above this limit. This was an extreme elevation and a tremendously brilliant strike. Even with his powerful bloodline, the Stone Emperor could only unleash such a devastating strike once. Boom! It was as if the fist yearned to pierce through the heavens as it bore down on Ling Han with a vast and profound might. Chapter 13:11 Battling Huangji. Boom! The earth tremored uncontrollably as the fist smashed down, with at least 1/3 of the forest being obliterated. The earth was like an upturned carpet, continuing to undulate as shock waves traveled through it. It only came to a rest after a few dozen seconds. This was utterly terrifying. The might of a single fist was actually this powerful. One had to realize that this was an area that had been formed by the clash of regulations of the two realms. In other words, it should have been indestructible. The Stone Emperor retracted his fist. Pa! His mountain-like fist instantly shrunk back to normal size. There was a look of haughty pride on his face. His devastating fist was capable of defeating most elites at the peak stage of the low extreme of the Sun-Moon tier, so how could a Mountain River tier cultivator withstand it? With his mountain-like fist now out of the way, the scene of carnage was finally laid bare for all to see. Ling Han was still standing. Gasp! Not only was the Stone Emperor shocked, but the others were all equally shocked as well. Ling Han had faced such a formidable strike head-on, yet he was still standing there as if nothing had ever happened. In reality, one would need to unleash power above the medium extreme of the Sun-Moon tier if they genuinely wanted to obliterate level 5 godly metal with brute strength. If one wanted to do so with power at the low extreme of the Sun-Moon tier, they would need to utilize the power of regulations as well. For example, they would have to unleash regulations of flames or regulations of poison. In any case, Ling Han practiced the indestructible heaven scroll, so both his defense and recovery ability were far above his battle prowess. If there were two Ling Hans in the world, a battle between them would definitely end with neither of them being able to kill each other. Ling Han stretched his muscles. His clothes had been completely destroyed, yet he had already put on a new change of clothes. He smiled, and said, "That punch was fairly impressive. Even my bones were almost broken." If the power of the Stone Emperor's strike had been a little stronger and reached the medium extreme of the Sun-Moon tier, it would have indeed been capable of breaking Ling Han's godly bones. At this moment, however, even the proud Stone Emperor was incredulous with shock. He had no choice but to yield, and said, "I'm no match for you if we battle at the same cultivation level." In terms of defense, Ling Han was even more powerful than him, a rock spirit. In terms of offense, Ling Han could unleash heaven's might and decrease his opponent's battle prowess by 2 stars. Thus, in a battle at the same cultivation level, even Supreme King tiers could only grudgingly admit defeat. Both his offensive and defensive abilities were incredible, so how could one possibly defeat him? If one wanted to defeat Ling Han, they would have to possess an advantage in cultivation level. "You're such a freak," the Stone Emperor remarked. Such a remark should have been spoken by others to describe him. Yet, at this moment, this remark was used by him to describe someone else. From this, it could be seen just how astonished he was. Ling Han laughed heartily, and said, "Now that you've lost, it's time to hand me a vial of spiritual liquid." The Stone Emperor felt extremely gloomy. However, he didn't break his promise, and he made a small cut on his arm, filling a small vial with his spiritual liquid. He was a heavenly body tier elite on top of being a rock spirit, so his blood was definitely a precious treasure, even among the heavenly body tier. He tossed the vial to Ling Han, who gladly placed it in the Black Tower. Meanwhile, Huangji and the North Emperor were still locked in a fierce battle, both of them unleashing their ultimate trump cards. The North Emperor wielded a saber, and it was as if even heaven and earth would be sliced open as he swung his golden saber through the air. Opposite him, Huangji wielded an ancient mirror that relentlessly fired bursts of scorching flames that seemed as if they could incinerate all matter. Their battle prowess was genuinely on par, and, at this moment, they were competing with their god tools. The North Emperor was the disciple of a saint, and although his saber wasn't forged from saintly material, it was forged from level 15 godly metal. This was material that even Eternal River tier elites would salivate over. A weapon forged from such a valuable material was naturally very powerful. However, it was extremely likely that Huangji's ancient mirror was a genuine saint tool. Its might was profound. Right now, both of their god tools had been suppressed to the Mountain River tier, so it was naturally the saint tool that enjoyed an edge, although only a very slight edge. With this slight edge, Huangji was finally able to assert his dominance, which became more and more evident as time went on. The North Emperor clearly wasn't an unreasonably stubborn person. He quickly retreated with a shake of his head, and said, "I've lost." Although he had only lost because he possessed a weaker god tool, a loss was a loss. There was no need to make any excuses. In a rare sight, Huangji finally became serious for a moment, saying, "You're very strong. However, if we battle at our true cultivation levels, I'll achieve victory with even more ease." If they battled at their true cultivation levels, the advantage of his Saint tool over the North Emperor's level 15 God tool would naturally be even more overwhelming. Ling Han couldn't help but feel surprised. By the looks of it, Yang Lin wasn't the only person blessed by the fortune of heaven and earth. Huangji also possessed a Saint tool. Next, Huangji turned to look at Ling Han. A menacing look appeared on his face, and he said, "After defeating you, I'll become the true king among kings." Ling Han laughed loudly, and said, "The scope of your vision is truly limited. To say nothing of which of us will win, what we can see is only a tiny fraction of the vast and boundless universe. Heaven knows if there are other more powerful prodigies out there. Indeed, he knew about the celestial realm, and Huangji had reached the Genesis tier after a mere 5 years of cultivation. So, at the mention of king among kings, come, fight me. Huangji stepped forward, and roared, 3 lifetimes akin to destruction, 7 slashes of the divine sense. Wang! A ferocious glint burst from his eyes, transforming into a divine sword that slashed at Ling Han. Ling Han was slightly astonished. This was actually a divine sense attack. He had come across many people who had cultivated their divine senses, rendering his 7-kill subduing soul technique almost ineffective. However, very few people practiced divine sense attacks. This was why he was so astonished upon seeing Huangji's attack. The divine sword arrived before Ling Han. Ling Han stood solemnly, not moving to block or catch the strike. He allowed the divine sword to continue toward the top of his head. Huangji sneered coldly. He had put a huge amount of effort into cultivating his divine sense, so it was not only incredibly sturdy but also possessed a devastating might when unleashed as an attack. Yet, this person actually dared to treat it so carelessly? He was truly asking for trouble. He had never imagined that this battle would be so effortless and easy to win. Ling Han cracked a smile, and asked, "That's all?" He practiced the indestructible heaven scroll, and thus his divine sense was a level above his cultivation level. As such, it would be incredibly difficult to wound his divine sense. Huangji's expression finally became serious. To block his divine sense attack was no amazing feat. However, Ling Han had faced his attack head-on and come out of it completely unscathed. This was quite terrifying. This person's divine sense is perhaps even stronger than mine. Huangji laughed loudly, and said, "Impressive. This is the decisive battle that I yearn." His seriousness transformed into a soaring fighting spirit, and he formed a series of hand seals as he said, "Eat my 8-phrase true technique. Birth, old age, sickness, and death, myriad diseases upon your body." Wang! Several bursts of black light shot out from Huangji's mouth, transforming into 8 eerie black symbols that crashed toward Ling Han. Ling Han instantly sensed a terrifying killing intent bearing down upon him. His entire body trembled in apprehension. This was a harrowing secret technique, one that put pressure on even him. He discovered that his vitality had been weakened significantly, with his mind and spirit both hitting a trough. Is this a curse? Ling Han had obtained the vial of curses before, and he could curse anyone to death as long as he obtained their blood, hair, or other bodily substances. Even if one was extremely resilient and didn't die from his curses, they would still suffer a terrible bout of illness and suffer severe wounds to their origin power. That vial had been owned by a bunch of people who had practiced netherworld cultivation techniques. Following this logic, it was probably safe to say that the art of curses was a cultivation technique of the netherworld. He gave a soft roar as he unleashed the might of lightning. Bursts of crackling white lightning instantly enveloped him, cleansing him of the effects of Huangji's curses. The power of heavenly tribulation could cleanse and purify all matter. Huangji cracked a smile, and said, "Interesting." Chapter 13-12 Fiery Hell Formation. "Take a punch from me too." Ling Han shouted loudly. As he swung his fist, lightning bolts flashed, and were thrown out together with his fist. Huangji dared not be careless. He, too, clenched a fist, and took a step forward with his right foot, punching out at the air. Pang! 2 different powers clashed midway, instantly creating a terrifying shock wave that swept out in all directions. This kind of overwhelming power would even send a cultivator at the peak of the consummate level of the mountain river tier flying upon the slightest contact, but everyone here were king tiers that had cultivated to the pinnacle level. The shock wave merely caused their clothing to flap and flutter loudly. So boring. Stone Emperor mumbled. He preferred a head-on clash when every punch landed on flesh. This kind of clash where both fighters were so far away from each other, no matter how intense it was, would still dissatisfy him. "Huh, try this move from me." Huangji laughed loudly, and delivered a smack at his waist. Xiao, xiao, xiao. Instantly, several hundred flags flew out, and stabbed into the ground around Ling Han. Every flag was exuding a weak light, and they resonated with each other. Suddenly, Ling Han's vision was completely filled with fog. Huangji was obviously just 30 meters away from him, but now, he could not even spot the slightest glimpse of him. It was not only Huangji. He could not see Faceless, the Stone Emperor, and the others either. A formation technique. Ling Han cast an eye over his surroundings, and couldn't help but think that this Huangji really had a lot of tricks up his sleeve. First it was a spiritual attack, followed by a curse, and now a formation technique. There seemed to be nothing that he had never gotten involved in. This was what a prodigy was. He was obviously leaving all his peers behind in the dust in terms of cultivation, yet still attained a level of achievement in other areas that others could only look up to. Just like how none of Ling Han's peers could compare to him in the field of alchemy. He did not move or panic. This formation was only capable of imprisoning him at most. As for defeating him, it was far from enough. Boom! A demonic creature walked out of the dense fog. It looked like a giant dog, but had 3 heads. Its 3 mouths were dripping with drool, and there were also black flames twined all over its body. As its paw stepped onto the ground immediately became roasted. It was filled with destructive power. Pa, pa, pa. Footsteps rang out in quick succession, and 3-headed dogs of fire appeared one after another, and surrounded Ling Han. The auras of these fire dogs were dense, and he was actually unable to estimate their cultivation level. "Human, if you can't even break out of this formation, you are completely unqualified to fight me." Huangji's voice rang out, and it was as empty as an echo. He actually could not grasp where his voice had come from. Ling Han smiled slightly, and said, "Whether I qualify or not is not what you can decide. If I want to thrash you, I will. If I do not want to thrash you, I will kick you aside." Huangji paused before coldly saying, "How arrogant." Boom! The 3-headed fire dogs shot out flames at the same time, and began to attack Ling Han. The fiery flames shot out, hiding the sky and covering the earth. Ling Han shook his head. He wanted to use fire against him? Wasn't that a joke? He had tempered his body in the immortal flame, though it was under the protection of the Black Tower. However, within the same cultivation level, or even 1 or 2 levels higher than him, what flames were capable of making him cower? The flames surged over, and Ling Han did not even raise a finger. His body itself turned into a black hole that absorbed the flames and turned them into his own. Ling Han could not see the situation outside, but those outside could see very clearly. The area surrounded by the flags seemed to have become a world of its own. Otherwise, how could it possibly accommodate so many 3-headed fire dogs when it was obviously such a small space? After a while, the Cloud Maiden guessed, "This is the fiery hell formation, right?" "That should be right." The North Emperor nodded. This formation was a great and powerful formation in the ancient times, and can even burn a saint. However, its might is obviously much weaker, so it is possibly a side formation that has been developed from the fiery hell formation. Huangji turned to look at the 2 of them in surprise. Just like the 2 of them had said, this was a side formation of the fiery hell formation, and was also a shrunken version of it. He had obtained it from an ancient site. He had not foreseen that it would actually be recognized. These king tiers from the immortal realm really could not be underestimated. However, he was proud. Even if it was just a side formation, and could not possibly kill a saint, in the outside world, it was definitely capable of trapping and killing a heavenly body tier. Even if its might was restricted in this place, it was still incredibly powerful. If Ling Han could not even pass this test, what right did he have to become his ultimate opponent? But when he saw that Ling Han actually neither dodged nor evaded underneath the burning of the fiery flames, and the millions of flames were actually being absorbed by Ling Han, even Huangji looked shocked. This was something that not even he could do. What kind of freak is he? This guy can actually absorb the might of the flames? Is it that he can only absorb the power of fire, or that he can absorb power of any element? Everyone was astonished. The difference was too massive. If he could absorb power of any element, then added with his frightening physique, he would really not lose to any of his peers. Even if he was not invincible, there would at least be no one that could defeat him. At first, they had thought that the best method to use against Ling Han was to use flames. That was because fire would overwhelm metal, and flame on the same level was definitely the best method to defeat godly metal. But from the look of things now, this path could no longer be considered. This freak. What exactly can we do to tear through his defenses? Everyone was frowning. The simplest method was to use pure power to break through all techniques. As long as power reached a certain extent, then who cared what level of god tool you were? I would be able to smash you into pieces with a single strike. However, all the people here were king tiers. What did king tier mean? Invincible among their peers. Now, if they were to reach a higher cultivation level, and use even stronger power to overwhelm Ling Han, then wasn't that admitting that they were no match for Ling Han on the same level? This was something that their pride would not allow. They were all scrambling their brains, furiously trying to think of a strategy. Within the formation, Ling Han was continuously absorbing the flames, right until these tall three-headed dogs of fire became smaller, and were no longer able to spit out any flames. This formation would then be resolved without him having to do anything else. The formation patterns on those several hundred flags had all darkened. They required a certain amount of time to absorb spiritual chi from the heaven and earth, and only then could one set up the formation again. Finally, Huangji nodded, and said, "I have to admit, you are qualified to be my opponent." Ling Han took one step forward, and softly spoke, "Then are you qualified to be mine?" However, his voice seemed to have become a blade and slashed out towards Huangji. "If I am not, who else in this world does?" Huangji also took a step forward, his eyes wide in anger. His gaze turned into a fist of flames, and struck out towards that blade. Pang, fist and blade projection clashed, erasing each other. They had all cultivated to the peak stage of the pinnacle level. Even if they all learnt different cultivation techniques, there was really not much difference in the level of their origin power. If one wanted to use a pure clash of origin power to decide the victor, they would have to clash for at least a few years. What decided the victor between them would be regulations, secret techniques, and bloodline. Ignorant, the Stone Emperor snorted. The North Emperor nodded as well, and said, "As far as I know, there is a person in the Seven Frost Galaxy. He's very, very strong. I have fought him in an equal battle once when I was in the low extreme of the Sun-Moon tier, but was defeated within 100 moves." Everyone was greatly astonished upon hearing these words. Chapter 13 Freezing Time. Everyone had witnessed with their own eyes how strong the North Emperor was. He had battled fiercely with Huangji to a crazy extent, and in the end, he had lost just because the grade of his god tool was that little bit worse. Merely in terms of individual battle prowess, the North Emperor was definitely not inferior to Huangji. But it was this kind of king among kings that actually admitted that he had been defeated within 100 moves by another person. Exactly what kind of monster was that other person? He was a little too strong, wasn't he? Ho, you all are just amazed because of your ignorance. Stone Emperor scoffed. You all are limiting yourself to this plane, and think that just being invincible among your peers on a single planet would entitle you to call yourself a king tier, so how could you all know just how wide this whole world is? The Cloud Maiden and the others all looked embarrassed at this. If these words had been spoken by anyone else, they would naturally treat it with disdain and think that the speaker was merely jealous, but it was a king tier that had spoken, who was moreover a king among kings, so his words were definitely heavy. However, the Stone Emperor had spoken too bluntly, completely refuting them. Meanwhile, the North Emperor smiled gently, and said, "Some people have always been traversing in between the two realms, and simultaneously experienced the regulations of both realms, merging them into one. Thus, in a battle between equals, they are naturally stronger." What? Cloud Maiden, Young Lin, and Tuoba Dong all turned ashen in shock. Even Faceless looked surprised. Stone Emperor gave another snort, and said, "What do you think the benefit that we had gotten previously was? It contained the regulations of the netherworld within, otherwise, on what basis could it allow all of you to increase your battle prowess greatly when there has been no change to your cultivation level, secret techniques, and bloodline?" The Cloud Maiden and the others once again experienced a shock. They had never thought of such a theory. Their level was limited, and the strongest backer behind them was only in the Eternal River tier, so in terms of understanding of cultivation, how could they compare to the Stone Emperor and North Emperor, who were both backed by saint-level forces? However, whether it is going from the netherworld to the immortal realm, or from the immortal realm to the netherworld, it is too dangerous. The North Emperor shook his head. Even he did not dare carelessly step into the territory of the netherworld. The moment his identity was exposed, he would definitely be hunted down and killed by elites of the netherworld. The Cloud Maiden was curious, and asked, since comprehending the regulations of both realms at the same time would allow one to become stronger, then why do the two realms not compromise and allow the other side to have a chance of comprehension? With how the two realms are opposing each other, how could they possibly allow cultivators from the other side to comprehend regulations in their territory? The North Emperor sighed. Rome wasn't built in one day. By nature, the two realms are on opposite sides, just like fire and water. How could they possibly get along with each other then? The Cloud Maiden and the others did not speak further. They only had to ask themselves. If this was not the two-realm prodigy gathering, and they saw a being of the netherworld, would they really not make a move to kill him? The answer was undoubtedly, they would. Killing one more being from the netherworld would mean that the immortal realm was that little bit safer, especially when it was a prodigy-level being from the netherworld. Significance of killing one such person would be even greater. Even they thought this way, what more when it was others? The conflict between the two realms had started from the very source, and who knew how many years their grudges had been accumulating for? How could they possibly be resolved? How could they possibly get along well with each other? Still, why is that when we are obviously in two opposing worlds, we could improve our abilities if we comprehend the regulations of the netherworld? The Cloud Maiden asked. She was a woman, and a beauty at that. By nature, she had the advantage in social relations, so she could conveniently ask some questions. The North Emperor and Stone Emperor looked at one another before shaking their heads. Even saints could not answer this question. If Ling Han had heard their discussion, he would definitely have been able to tell them that only if one simultaneously comprehended the regulations of both realms would he be able to open the great door that opened into the celestial realm and obtain a true immortal life. Ling Han used his own body like a bow, and used his origin power as an arrow. The lightning mark on his right hand glowed, boosting the power of the arrow. Pa, blazing white lightning danced on the arrow of origin power, exuding the power of heaven's might. Huangji suddenly looked astonished. This arrow had not even been shot, and he could already feel a frightening pressure. The moment it was released, it would definitely be earth-shattering. Ling Han's hand loosened, and the arrow of origin power shot out, as fast as a streak of light. The annihilating dragon star arrow was already extraordinarily fast by itself, and now that it had fused with the lightning of heavenly tribulation, its speed was naturally further increased to a whole new level. His hand had just released it, and in the next instant, it had arrived at Huangji's chest. Huangji paled in shock. He knew that the moment this arrow from Ling Han was shot, it would definitely be incomparably terrifying, but he had completely not imagined that it would be so fast. In his eyes, the arrow of origin power blazed with incredibly blinding lightning, and was endlessly becoming larger. "Freeze!" he shouted loudly, his face twisting. However, an ancient aura surged out of his body, which seemed incredibly mysterious. The world suddenly slowed down. That arrow that had been initially as fast as a strike of lightning became as slow as an ant, yet Huangji was completely unaffected. He ducked to the side, and managed to dodge the arrow's tip. But it was in that one instant that the world went back to normal. The arrow of origin power shot past, bringing with it blazing lightning that sank into the dense forest afar. Huangji was both furious and stunned. He had a great secret, and that was the fact that his bloodline was incredibly powerful. He could even manipulate time and cause the time of a part of the area around him to pause, but it could only last for an instant. But being able to influence time was undoubtedly the most fearful ability in this world. As long as he was given the chance to come close enough, he could even kill an eternal river tier while he himself was only in the heavenly body tier. However, this kind of ability could not be used according to his will, and could only be used once every 3 days. That was because it required the power of his bloodline, and the moment he had exhausted that mysterious power in his bloodline, he could only slowly recover it. And he had actually used this kind of powerful ability so quickly. Huangji was naturally furious. He glared at Ling Han, yet was even warier. He was afraid that Ling Han would shoot another arrow at him. He could no longer use this kind of ability. With a soft shout, he charged towards Ling Han. Boom! 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 He closed the distance between them, but did not reach the extent when they could engage in a completely physical fight. There were about 3 meters between them. This way, not only would Ling Han be unable to use his archery skill, Huangji's battle prowess would also be maximized. Ling Han was unafraid, though. He was only curious. Why had the annihilating dragon star arrow seemingly paused in that instant before it reached Huangji just now? Though it was only a negligible instant, it was this minor pause that allowed an opening for Huangji to dodge to the side. Freezing time? Ling Han's heart clenched. If that was really the case, then this kind of technique was really too powerful. However, if Huangji had really grasped this kind of technique, then wouldn't he have been absolutely invincible? How could he have possibly fought such a close battle with the North Emperor and still had to win with the help of a saint tool in the end, then? This kind of technique definitely could not be used forever, that was why it would only be used at the most crucial moment. The question was, how many times could it be used? Ling Han, though, was not all that worried. Even if his time had been frozen by Huangji, with how strong his physique was, it was absolutely unrealistic if he wanted to kill him in that small instant. He stretched open his hand, and pressed down on the other. Boom! 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 2 ultimate king tiers began their clash. This was the final battle, and the victor could enjoy the boost from good fortune on his own. Chapter 13-14 Essence Divine Flames. At the beginning, both Ling Han and Huangji were wary of each other, fearing that the other had some terrifying fatal move hidden up his sleeve. They fought very carefully, and dared not go all out. But as the battle continued, their temper and pride welled up. Fist breaks everlasting. Huangji roared loudly. As his fists pounded, they separated like the horns of a goat and barraged Ling Han. Pressure was as heavy as a mountain. Ling Han humped, and no longer pretended. He used heaven's might, which he suppressed downwards on Huangji. Ha ha ha, this move is useless on me. Huangji laughed loudly, a flickering light flashing in his eyes. There was a fire burning inside him, and it actually burnt the heaven's might into nothing. This was a black flame, and Ling Han felt cold just from looking at it. Essence divine flames, the Stone Emperor and North Emperor exclaimed simultaneously. The two of them looked at each other, and both looked stunned. What are essence divine flames? Cloud Maiden asked. If she did not know, she only had to ask. In any case, women had an advantage in such matters as they did not have to worry about the issue of losing face. The Stone Emperor's expression was solemn, and he said, in the world, there's a total of 99 types of divine flame. In legends, they have existed since the world was created. The immortal realm has such flames, and so does the netherworld. The North Emperor nodded, and then continued, essence divine flames practically cannot merge with any living creature, but there are also exceptional situations. Those who obtain the essence divine flames, could become a saint, without exception. And there's a total of 99 different types of divine flames in the world, and they all are inextinguishable. Even if they merge with a living being, they would still return to nature upon his or her death. Essence divine flames are the true precious treasure of the world. Embedded in one's body, they could help a cultivator comprehend the great Tao of the fire of heaven and earth. If he used it, even a saint could be burnt to nothing, the Stone Emperor continued. Of course, it is limited by cultivation level. Huangji could not possibly be this strong at present, but it is enough to increase his battle prowess by another 1 or 2 stars, the North Emperor said solemnly. The Cloud Maiden and the others all looked astonished. To further increase 1 or 2 stars of battle prowess from their kind of foundation? That was too frightening. This guy, could it be that he is the beloved child of heaven and earth? The Stone Emperor gritted his teeth. Though he was the son of a saint, he still did not have the kind of property that Huangji had. Everyone turned to look at Yang Lin. He was also a beloved son of heaven and earth, who had been recognized as master by a saint tool. Yang Lin shook his head with a grimace, and said, compared to him, I'm practically a beggar. They had similarly gained a saint tool, and Huangji's was a complete one, while his was badly damaged. In terms of other treasures, he had only picked up some alchemical pills, but Huangji? He had actually obtained the essence divine flames of the heaven and earth, which was equivalent to having a portion of the great Tao of fire permanently embedded inside his body. What could compare to the effects of comprehension from that? No wonder Huangji had advanced into the heavenly body tier when he was only 200 years old. With the help of essence divine flames, it was practically a piece of cake for him to accumulate comprehension of his cultivation level. He merely needed to increase the accumulation of his origin power. A beloved child of heaven and earth like him could probably pick up some kind of ancient godly medicine just by walking into the mountains. After ingesting one, his cultivation level would probably soar. Who could defeat a person that was so blessed with good fortune? Everyone still did not know that Huangji's bloodline was similarly frightening. It could even influence time itself, or they would be even more stunned. How could the good fortune of heaven and earth dote on a single person so much? However powerful you may be, it is still not enough in front of me. That is because I am a born king. Huangji declared arrogantly. In his eyes, this heaven's might should be Ling Han's strongest trump card. It could weaken his opponent by 2 stars of battle prowess, which was too nature-defying. Too bad. He was a human embodiment of the Tao of heaven and earth, so how could he possibly be weakened? You blabber too much. Ling Han had nothing against arrogant people, prodigies were naturally proud. But if he was blabbering a lot of nonsense, then that would really be too dislikable. He flicked his finger, and shio, multiple flashes of sword chi shot out. Lightning sword technique had fused with the true might of heavenly tribulation. Huangji laughed loudly. As he continued to deliver punches, he said, "Just obediently become subservient to me. I am an undefeatable king, and there will eventually be a day that I will rule over both the immortal realm and netherworld. Ignorant fools like all of you don't even know how short-sighted you are being. My ambition is something that you all don't even have the right to imagine." Ling Han scoffed, and asked, "The celestial realm?" "Pooh!" Huangji suddenly spluttered. This was the greatest secret hidden inside his heart. He was incredibly arrogant precisely because he knew of the existence of the celestial realm. Putting aside the fact that he did not take to heart the king tiers of the immortal realm, the king tiers of the netherworld were below his notice as well. That was because he was confident that he should belong to the celestial realm where he could look down on all other living beings, noble and highly positioned. The netherworld and the immortal realm were all merely his stepping stones so that he could grow and mature, and when he reached the position of saint, he would split open the ancient path and enter into the celestial realm. This was his largest secret hidden in the innermost depths of his heart, and he had never shared it with anyone else before, because not a single person was qualified to know it. But what about now? What he thought of as his greatest secret was now being carelessly and uncaringly blurted out by another as if that wasn't any earth-shattering secret, but rather a piece of common knowledge. In this instant, it was as if he had fallen from the clouds. He was filled with despondence and confusion. How could you possibly know? He was at a complete loss. Yet Ling Han did not answer, and instead deduced, "You could influence my arrow previously, this should be the ability of your bloodline. And, I know, you should be a member of an ancient divine tribe." Huangji's expression twisted suddenly, veins instantly popping out on his forehead as his killing intent soared. He was the only one left of this branch of his bloodline, and in his bloodline, there was a rule: no one could know his true identity, and he would have to kill whoever found out that secret. "You seek death," he roared. The divine flame in his body flickered and suddenly surged out. It danced and swirled around him, incredibly frightening. This was a divine flame that could burn even a saint with a single touch. He charged towards Ling Han, actually taking the initiative to enter into a close-quarters battle with Ling Han. Ling Han naturally was unafraid, and began a clash of blows with him. Pung! 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 Huangji was indeed very strong, but his physique was obviously no match for Ling Han's and the Stone Emperor's. This kind of clash was too disadvantageous for him. Because origin power was limited, if he concentrated his origin power on attack, there would definitely be issues with his defense, but if he cared only about defense, his attack would be lacking, so what was the point of him charging forward? They merely exchanged a few blows, and blood was already blooming on his fist. Yet it was right at this moment that Huangji suddenly opened his mouth and spat out a black-colored flame that was aimed directly at Ling Han's face. With how close they were, how could Ling Han dodge? Pooh! A mouthful of divine flame was completely spat over Ling Han's face. As fiery flames burned brightly, Ling Han's figure had completely vanished. This was a divine flame of heaven and earth, and could block vision and divine sense. He's finished. This was a divine flame that could even burn a saint into ash. Even if this place was under restrictions, it was definitely a piece of cake to burn a living being of the same level. Even the Stone Emperor thought that even if Ling Han had not died, he would still have been severely wounded. This was a divine flame of heaven and earth, and had appeared with the creation of the world. It was even more noble than his line of rock spirits. Chapter 13-15 Collecting the Essence Divine Flames. A bizarre scene appeared. The black-colored divine flame actually surged out continuously from Huangji's body as if something was tugging at it. In that one instant, the essence divine flames had completely slipped out of Huangji's body, and were entwined around Ling Han. No! Huangji involuntarily exclaimed in shock. This was not something that he had done on purpose, wanting to use even stronger divine flames to burn Ling Han to ash. It was rather a mysterious force that had pulled the divine flames out by force. But, how could this be possible? The essence divine flames were a force that belonged to the heaven and earth, they were the most ancient and strongest existence. Aside from other essence divine objects, what else could be a match for them? Even if Ling Han also possessed some essence divine object, they would only be an equal match. Why was it that he could pull out his divine flames from his body by force? This was practically an overwhelming advantage. Huangji was really in a panic, because he did not understand the situation. Ordinarily, the essence divine flames were the very most awesome existence, whether it was in the immortal realm or the netherworld. Could it be that Ling Han had a precious treasure that surpassed these two realms? In reality, it was indeed so. When he was attacked by the essence divine flames, Ling Han did not care much. After all, divine flames would also be weakened to mountain river tier in this place, and he was one who had been burnt by immortal flames. This was naturally a piece of cake for him. Yet Small Tower suddenly sent him a mental message, telling him not to resist, because it wanted to draw away this divine flame. Ling Han naturally cooperated. With them drawn into the Black Tower, wouldn't they then become his? Thus, he stood there without moving, and allowed Huangji to barrage him with divine flames. And the Black Tower indeed moved, forcibly drawing all the divine flames out of Huangji's body by force. That's right. It is indeed a source power, and can allow me to recover by a 10,000th. Small Tower declared with slight happiness. Fuck. Ling Han immediately countered, hey. What you mean is you are planning to take them all for yourself? I was the one who drew them out in the first place, so of course they are mine. Small Tower was not the slightest bit embarrassed. Moreover, only if I completely recovered would I be able to deceive the heaven and earth, so you would still be able to hide the secret of the Black Tower when you enter into the celestial realm in future. That's plain robbery. Ling Han's heart ached. They were essence divine flames, just from the name, he knew they were good stuff. Don't grumble so much, coordinate with me quickly. Small Tower demanded. Though it could stimulate the Black Tower into destroying and raising the heaven and earth, that would also draw the notice of the celestial realm, so it needed Ling Han's cooperation. I can cooperate, but you have to give me a little profit. Ling Han bargained. This Tsundere Tower was also without conscience, so it was impossible to squeeze anything out of it without putting up a fight. Fine. Small Tower hesitated, and finally agreed reluctantly. The man and Tower cooperated, beginning to collect these essence divine flames. Black Tower was completely capable of doing it alone, but to do it without letting off any aura required Ling Han's cooperation. That was because this place restricted the cultivation level of all existences, and Ling Han was one who had survived the immortal flame. Ling Han's hands stretched out of the black flames, and formed a hand sign. He opened his mouth, and these divine flames were instantly swallowed into his mouth. Give it back to me. Huangji was boiling with fury, and hurriedly rushed forwards to snatch them back. They were one of his most important trump cards, so how could he simply sit by and watch as Ling Han snatched them away? In his panic, he did not ponder the question of how Ling Han actually managed to collect the essence divine flames. The Stone Emperor and the others were all frozen, looking on dumbfounded. Were they really essence divine flames? Wasn't it said that even a saint could be burnt with a single touch? How could it now be drawn back and forth between the two of them? As Ling Han moved to exchange blows with Huangji, he continued to endlessly absorb the divine flames with the technique that Small Tower had taught him. Pitifully, these essence divine flames still planned to fight back, but it was completely impossible that they could oppose the control of the Black Tower. Wasting effort, they formed various shapes, yet they were swallowed bit by Ling Han. It looked like they had entered into Ling Han's mouth, but in truth, they were immediately absorbed by the Black Tower. After all, the essence divine flames were filled with enmity towards him, so it was completely impossible that they would fuse with him. Instead, they wanted to burn him to nothing, so if they truly entered his body, it would definitely not be a good thing. Being able to bear the might of the divine flames and letting the divine flames burn inside one's body were completely two different things. As he saw how the divine flames became smaller and smaller, Huangji was anxious, furious, and panicking all at the same time. He exploded with even greater battle prowess, wanting to stop Ling Han from swallowing his divine flames. Die! 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 Huangji roared loudly. Since his birth, he had never lost his composure as much as he did in this instant. It couldn't be helped, though. This was a trump card that he depended on the most. Sorry, but whatever has entered my pocket would be mine, Ling Han said smilingly. With Small Tower acting, the rate at which the Black Tower was swallowing was becoming faster and faster. It was not taking so much time because the Black Tower was not working hard enough. On the contrary, Small Tower was controlling the absorption rate to prevent it from being too fast, for it could cause the aura of the Black Tower to leak. Bastard! Huangji finally drew his Saint Tool. The ancient mirror appeared, and boom, a fiery dragon appeared in the mirror, roaring as it surged towards Ling Han. When he saw this Saint Tool, the North Emperor's expression involuntarily darkened. Though he was a magnanimous man, seeing this god tool that had defeated himself still caused a ripple in his emotions. After all, it was not Huangji who had defeated him, but rather this Saint Tool. Wang, the divine demon sword appeared, and Ling Han gripped it in his hand, slashing out towards that dragon of fire. Over 100 sword projections swept past, and that fire dragon was instantly reduced to pieces, without the slightest bit of might left. The North Emperor and the others all looked stunned, turning their eyes towards the divine demon sword in Ling Han's grasp. The might of a Saint Tool was obvious to all, but it seemed like this sword of Ling Han's was even stronger than a Saint Tool. Gasp! In this place where cultivation levels were equal, Saint Tools would definitely be stronger than other god tools. However, this sword of Ling Han's was even stronger, and that meant, this was also a Saint Tool, and its grade was even higher. After all, Saints were divided into 4 cultivation levels, so Saint Tools naturally would be divided into 4 levels. Had they seen a ghost? A Saint Tool couldn't possibly appear under normal conditions, yet now they appeared one after another as if they were as common as level 4 or 5 god tools. The Black Tower swallowed the last bit of divine flame, and Ling Han also closed his mouth, revealing an expression of satisfaction. He looked at Huangji, his eyes filled with admiration. He was fond of these people with nature-defying good fortune. What was theirs would be his, and it could save him quite a lot of effort. Huangji, though, was fuming as he exclaimed, "Return my divine flame to me." "Don't be so petty, we all can." Ling Han had just spoken a few words when his expression drastically changed. That was because Small Tower had already refined those essence divine flames, and it had indeed gave him a portion as per their agreement. However, this portion was not even the share of a 10,000th. It couldn't screw him over like this. Fuck, this robbing tower, tricking even him. Small Tower. Ling Han roared through his divine sense. "What are you shouting for? My ears are not bad." Small Tower humphed. "You're just giving me this little bit?" Ling Han asked angrily. The one putting his life on the line was him, but he actually didn't even get much profit out of it. This was really too much. Chapter 13-16 The Unfortunate Huangji. I only said that I'll share a bit with you. However, I didn't say how much. Small Tower said shamelessly. You're even more shameless than me. Ling Han was completely speechless at this moment. Small Tower was far too underhanded. "Brat, you'll only be well if I'm well," Small Tower said. It even wore a philosophical look on its face as it spoke. Ling Han was so angry that he wanted to ignore Small Tower. However, he was already at the peak stage of the consummate level of the Sun-Moon tier at this moment, so if he didn't break through, it would be useless no matter how much of the divine flames he was given. In fact, receiving too much would only overfill him and cause him to explode. However, he was still furious that the fucking Small Tower had screwed him over like this. "Give it back to me!" Huangji roared in fury. The person before him had clearly stolen his divine flames, yet he was actually wearing a pissed-off expression. Was he trying to infuriate him to death? He howled in anger, and black divine flames burst from his eyes. These were essence divine flames, and he had refined a tiny amount of them into his body. He had genuinely only refined a very tiny amount. Due to the limit of his cultivation level, he couldn't refine any more than he already had. After all, these were essence divine flames that even saints were apprehensive of. However, this tiny amount of essence divine flames had given him the ability to oppose the power of heaven's might. Otherwise, if his battle prowess were decreased by 2 stars, he would fall from a Supreme King tier to become an ordinary King tier. "You forced me to do this." Huangji's hands became a blur as he started to form a series of complicated hand seals. His aura became even more powerful, and it was as if his battle prowess had elevated by 1 to 2 stars. This was absolutely incredible. After reaching the level of Supreme King tier, it should have been impossible for them to become any stronger. However, Huangji had to pay a significant price for this power. A lock of his hair immediately became white, and his appearance also seemed to age by numerous years. Wrinkles appeared on his forehead. Ling Han instantly understood what had happened. Huangji had indeed become more powerful, yet he had paid for this power with his lifespan. Moreover, he had paid a significant amount by the looks of it. Otherwise, it wouldn't have reflected on his appearance so clearly. This made a lot of sense. If Huangji were only a 3 or 4 star genius, he would have obtained an extra 2 stars of battle prowess if he sacrificed several hundred or several thousand years of his lifespan. However, he had already reached the theoretical peak of the mountain river tier, so he would have needed to sacrifice an astronomical number of years of his lifespan to elevate his battle prowess by 1 to 2 stars. This was similar to how explosive thunder pills were useless to Ling Han now. After reaching the pinnacle level, trying to advance any further would be extremely difficult. However, Huangji had no choice but to sacrifice his lifespan for more power. The essence divine flames were of tremendous importance to him, and he definitely couldn't lose them just like that. Otherwise, the speed of his cultivation would drop at least 10-fold, perhaps even 100-fold. Even if he were a genius, he couldn't stand to lose so much time. If a heavenly body tier elite were stuck at the same cultivation level for tens of millions of years, they would only end up dying at the heavenly body tier. However, if they could raise the speed of their cultivation by 100-fold, it was very likely that they would be able to reach the Eternal River tier or even Genesis tier. Cultivation was like a race against time. One had to advance to the next level before they reached the end of their lifespan. This was like sailing upstream, one would be swept back if they didn't advance. Anyhow, Huangji's power was definitely unparalleled in the mountain river tier at this moment. When he threw a punch, even space shuddered, with swirls of shock waves traveling through the air. Pang, pang, pang. It mattered little that Faceless and the others were also king tiers. They were ruthlessly swept off their feet by the overwhelming shock waves. Just the shock waves alone were already this powerful, so how could Ling Han defend against this strike? He was the target of this strike, and he would have to face its domineering might head-on. Pang! Ling Han threw a punch, and his fist collided with Huangji's. The muscles on Ling Han's arms rippled like the waves of a disturbed lake. The ripples traveled from his fist all the way up to his shoulder. Pa, pa, pa. His skin instantly cracked open, blood exploding into the air. Then, his entire body was sent flying. The difference between their power was far too great. However, Ling Han somersaulted in the air and landed firmly on the ground. He then channeled the indestructible heaven scroll, healing his right arm at a speed that was visible to the naked eye. These were merely flesh wounds, and his godly bones were completely unscathed. Thus, healing these wounds couldn't be any easier. Pooh! Everyone spluttered in surprise. There was a difference of 2 stars between their power, meaning that Huangji should have enjoyed a crushing advantage, yet Ling Han had only received some minor flesh wounds. Moreover, he had even healed these wounds in an instant. What kind of defense was this? What kind of recovery ability was this? In reality, how could the Stone Emperor and North Emperor, a descendant and a disciple of a saint, respectively, not have secret techniques to elevate their battle prowess? However, like with Huangji, these secret techniques required them to pay a heavy price. In fact, this price was so heavy that it was far more valuable than obtaining the first place in this 2-realm prodigy gathering. Huangji was only going so far because his essence divine flames had been stolen by Ling Han. Thus, he was willing to sacrifice millions of years of his lifespan to snatch these essence divine flames back. However, Huangji was destined to suffer a huge loss. Freak, the rock spirit muttered. Among the spirits of the 5 elements, the wood spirits were the most gifted in terms of recovery ability, while the rock spirits were the most gifted in terms of defensive ability. However, Ling Han's defense was no weaker than his, and his recovery ability was also no weaker than that of wood spirits. Thus, even he couldn't help but exclaim in surprise and admiration. With how incredibly freakish he was, could anyone at the same cultivation level as him kill him? The Stone Emperor turned to look at the North Emperor, who responded with a shake of his head. This was the first time he had felt so helpless against someone. Huangji's face was a picture of shock and disbelief. He stared at Ling Han dazedly, and he almost felt an urge to rub his eyes to see whether or not he was seeing things right. However, as a Supreme King tier, he was confident that he wasn't hallucinating. Ling Han was genuinely unfazed after eating his strike. "I don't believe this," Huangji said through gritted teeth. He threw another punch. Boom! Crimson flames curled through the air as his iron-like fist smashed toward Ling Han. The might of this fist had already soared to a level infinitesimally close to the peak stage of the low extreme of the Sun-Moon tier. Pang! As expected, Ling Han was sent flying again. A difference of 2 stars was truly too great, especially since they were both supreme prodigies who were very evenly matched to begin with. Like before, Ling Han's flesh cracked open again, sending blood spraying through the air. However, his godly bones were still unscathed. There was a burst of golden light, and Ling Han recovered at an incredible rate. It wasn't long before he was fully healed again. This was Ling Han's strongest quality. The indestructible heaven scroll was a cultivation technique from the celestial realm. This was a cultivation technique that even saints couldn't match. "I don't believe this. I don't believe this. I don't believe this." Huangji descended into a frenzy, refusing to accept such an outcome. He launched a flurry of strikes, all of them imbued with his full power and belief of invincibility. He was going to obliterate Ling Han. Unfortunately, however, his efforts were all in vain. In fact, even his power was starting to drop by the minute. He had sacrificed a huge amount of his lifespan to elevate his 10-star battle prowess by another 2 stars, yet the millions of years of his lifespan had gone to waste just like that. 10 stars was a pinnacle to begin with, and this wasn't something that could be transcended. If one wanted to defy heaven, they would have to pay an exorbitant price. "I'm truly sorry." It was, your greatest misfortune to come across me, Ling Han said. He started to counterattack. With his powerful physique to support him, he didn't need to worry about defending at all. Being as powerful as Huangji was, he could naturally still look down on everyone else present. Even if the 7 prodigies teamed up, they would still be no match for him. However, he was unable to breach Ling Han's defenses no matter what he did. His attack, which could easily crush any other king tier, was completely useless against Ling Han. All it could do was give him some minor flesh wounds. Was this truly the final battle of the 2-realm prodigy gathering? Why did it look like a one-sided pummeling? Moreover, it wasn't the stronger Huangji that was pummeling Ling Han, but instead Ling Han who was pummeling the stronger Huangji. Faceless and the others all wore strange expressions. Considering it's a tower and has no face, this line is probably supposed to refer to the tone of voice instead. Chapter 13-17 King Among Kings. In terms of battle prowess alone, this battle was indeed worthy of being the final battle. Right now, Huangji's power had already soared to the late stage of the low extreme of the Sun-Moon tier. He had already surpassed the pinnacle limit of 10 stars, and this was absolutely petrifying. However, in terms of outcome, this battle was an absolute joke. When Huangji's devastating strikes hit Ling Han, all they could do was break a bit of his skin. They were unable to cause any damage to his godly bones. Ling Han was like an indestructible battle god. Meanwhile, although Ling Han was counterattacking, he didn't aim to kill Huangji. Huangji was blessed by the fortune of heaven, so perhaps he could still obtain many precious treasures in the future. That being the case, it was better to let him live so that Ling Han could rob him again in the future. It would be a shame to kill him now. If Huangji knew of Ling Han's thoughts at this moment, he would definitely vomit blood in anger. Now, however, he had already expended most of his sacrificed lifespan. His power continued to weaken, dropping from 2 stars above the pinnacle to 1 star, and then down to 0 stars. With their battle prowess now even, how could Huangji possibly be Ling Han's opponent? He was suppressed in all fields, with his defense and recovery ability both weaker than Ling Han's. In terms of god tools, Ling Han's divine demon sword was a future celestial tool. Huangji vomited 3 mouthfuls of blood as he frantically retreated hundreds of steps. He didn't launch any further attack. There was a baleful look in his eyes as he glowered at Ling Han. In this place, he genuinely couldn't defeat Ling Han. However, this didn't matter, as they wouldn't remain in this place forever. Once they left, he could return to his cultivation level of the low extreme of the heavenly body tier. Meanwhile, Ling Han would only be a Sun-Moon tier cultivator. As such, Ling Han wouldn't be able to withstand a single strike of his. At that time, he could personally kill Ling Han and take back his essence divine flames. Ling Han smiled faintly. Even if Huangji could defeat him, his essence divine flames had already been refined by the hooligan small tower. Right now, there wasn't even a wisp of the essence divine flame remaining. So, how could Huangji snatch it back? Are you admitting defeat? He asked with a smile. Huangji breathed heavily, and it was as if he wanted to chop Ling Han into 10,000 pieces. However, he was a king tier, after all, so he was still able to contain his fury. He flung his sleeves and walked to the side. It was always him who had said these words to other people. Now that he was hearing it from Ling Han, it was as if his heart were being cut by a blade. This was an excruciating feeling. In any case, the king among kings had finally been born. It was Ling Han. Who would have guessed this? The final victor wasn't Huangji, nor was it the Stone Emperor or North Emperor. It certainly wasn't Yonglin, the Cloud Maiden, or Yuing, either. Instead, it was this little-known youth. Only those who had heard of Ling Han's name in the 2-realm battlefield would wave their hands in excitement, and exclaim, "I knew this would be the result." Because the 3-day time limit hadn't expired yet, the blessing of heaven and earth didn't immediately descend, even though the final victor had already been determined. "Congratulations, Brother Ling." The Stone Emperor, North Emperor, Faceless, and the others all walked over to congratulate Ling Han. Even Yang Lin and the Cloud Maiden came over to congratulate him. In fact, there was a bright glimmer in the Cloud Maiden's beautiful eyes as she looked at him, and it was clear that there were other feelings brewing in her mind. Beautiful women loved heroic men. Ling Han smiled as he accepted their congratulations. At this moment, the heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden finally arrived after walking up from the foot of the mountain. She had seen the battle clearly from there, so she was also filled with joy and delight. Who would have imagined that Ling Han, someone she had bullied at will before, would grow to become such a powerful individual? "This is my wife," Ling Han said with a smile. He introduced the heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden to everyone. Of course, this everyone only included the 5 people from the immortal realm. The 2 beings from the netherworld stood far away from him as if he were plague. The Stone Emperor and the others all greeted the heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden with a smile. Their attitudes were extremely kind and cordial. Even if they didn't think much about her, they would still have to show her respect simply because of her relationship with Ling Han. Anyhow, Ling Han had already left a deep impression in their mind, so they naturally didn't mind being more friendly with those close to him, though the heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden couldn't even be considered a true king tier. In the beginning, the Cloud Maiden had only been curious about Ling Han. She was curious about how someone could cultivate to become such a freak. However, after seeing Ling Han being all lovey-dovey with the heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden, she started to feel a little dissatisfied. Had he not noticed her stunning beauty? Why was he so into the heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden? In terms of looks, neither she nor the heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden was more beautiful than the other. However, in terms of cultivation, talent, and status, she was galaxies ahead of the heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden. So, why did Ling Han only have eyes for the heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden? Her competitive nature was roused, so she purposefully badgered Ling Han to make small talk with him. Whenever the heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden spoke, she would definitely target her with rebukes. She wanted to rile the heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden up so that she would try to compete with her. Once she did, it would be blatantly obvious which of them was the more talented. Ling Han didn't pay any heed to this. He liked the heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden not because of her beauty, but because of their relationship and lovesickness that had spanned 10,000 years. Their love was already determined by fate, and this was something that the Cloud Maiden could never make up for. The time limit of 3 days finally expired. Wang! A column of light descended from the sky and enveloped Ling Han, the only remaining person on the platform. He was receiving a blessing of fortune. Immediately after, however, another column of light descended and enveloped Huangji. He was also receiving a blessing of fortune. What? Pa. Another 4 columns of light descended, enveloping Faceless, the North Emperor, the Stone Emperor, and Yang Lin. They also received a blessing of fortune. Isn't the blessing of heaven and earth only meant for the final victor, the king among kings? Everyone was stunned. This was far too strange, no? Could it be that one will be recognized by this place as long as they surpass the peak stage of the pinnacle level? Then why has this never occurred before? Simple. Because only one king tier has ever appeared in each of the past gatherings. In other words, Supreme King tiers have never appeared before. This time, however, a whopping 6 Supreme King tiers have appeared all at once. They've all unleashed a battle prowess above the peak stage of the pinnacle level. Even though Yang Lin had relied on alchemical pills to surpass the peak stage of the pinnacle level, he had indeed obtained a battle prowess powerful enough to challenge King among Kings during that limited amount of time. In other words, he had become a king among kings for that short period of time. Yang Lin and Faceless were naturally beside themselves with delight, and they hurriedly sat down to absorb the celestial qi. This celestial qi could help them complete their comprehension of the regulations. The Stone Emperor and the North Emperor were also overjoyed. After all, they had come here especially for this celestial qi. The rewards offered by the two imperial empires certainly weren't enough to attract them here. After all, one of them was the descendant of a saint, while the other was a disciple of a saint. Only Huangji wanted to vomit blood in anger. If he had known this earlier, would he have still fought tooth and nail with Ling Han? Not only had he lost his essence divine flames, but he had even lost millions of years of his lifespan. Although he was still young, and could definitely advance to the eternal river tier where he would gain hundreds of millions of years of lifespan, who was willing to shave so many years off their life? He had sacrificed so much, yet he had still been unable to snatch his essence divine flames back. Even the blessing of heaven and earth was unable to bring him any joy. Simply put, the value of this blessing was completely insignificant compared to the value of the essence divine flames. "I'll deal with him when we get out of this place," he said in his mind. He definitely had to snatch the essence divine flames back. Definitely. Wang, wang, wang. Celestial qi permeated through the air, yet it was a shame that the Cloud Maiden, the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden, and Tuoba Dong could only watch on in envy from the sides. There was nothing they could do about this. This was a reward that belonged to Supreme King Tears. Ling Han sat cross-legged as he aggressively absorbed the celestial qi, perfecting his comprehension of the regulations for each of his cultivation levels. Chapter 13:18 Might of the Stone Emperor. If Ling Han ventured to the netherworld, of course he could complete his comprehension of the regulations. However, the netherworld only had its own set of regulations. This was unlike the celestial qi, which contained both the regulations of the immortal realm and the regulations of the netherworld. Compared to comprehending a single set of regulations by itself, comprehending this celestial qi was a complete breeze. It could be said that comprehending regulations in the netherworld for 10,000 years wouldn't be as beneficial as comprehending celestial qi in this place for a mere 2 hours. Moreover, if an immortal realm being ventured into the netherworld, they would be like a radiant sun amid the darkness because of the different regulations that they practiced. They would stick out like a sore thumb and become a clear target wherever they went. Add to that the animosity between the immortal realm and the netherworld, and it was certain that they would be hunted down relentlessly. If heavenly body tier elites couldn't kill them, then the netherworld would send eternal river tier elites. If eternal river tier elites couldn't kill them, then the netherworld would send Genesis tier saints. In the netherworld, immortal realm beings wouldn't be able to wield the power of regulations, regardless of how powerful they were. Even if one were invincible in the immortal realm, they would fall to the level of an Alsoran if they ever crossed into the netherworld. Their death couldn't come any quicker or swifter. In any case, the regulations of the netherworld also had the ability to corrupt people. If one stayed in the netherworld for a long time, they would indeed be able to comprehend the regulations of the netherworld. However, the immortal realm regulations that they had previously comprehended would also disappear. This was like a multiple-choice question where one could only pick one option. It was impossible to pick both options. Thus, the preciousness of this celestial qi was astounding. Otherwise, why would a descendant of a saint and a disciple of saint have come here? They only had 3 days to absorb this celestial qi, so the 6 people didn't dare to waste even a second of their time. Even Huangji forcefully suppressed his anger to absorb as much of the celestial qi as he could, completing his comprehension of the regulations. This could elevate his battle prowess and more importantly help him complete his comprehension of the regulations. By completing his comprehension of the regulations, he would obtain a foundation that would allow him to reach greater heights. Ling Han had already reached the peak stage of the consummate level of the Sun-Moon tier, so his cultivation wouldn't advance any further unless he broke through to the pinnacle level. In fact, this wasn't a bad thing at this moment, as he didn't need to waste any of his energy on raising his cultivation level. He could focus his full attention on completing his comprehension of the regulations. The previous time he had absorbed celestial qi, he had perfected his regulations to the high extreme of the mountain river tier. This could elevate his battle prowess by a little, though this amount of elevation was nothing compared to the pinnacle level of the mountain river tier. After one day, Ling Han successfully perfected his comprehension of the regulations to the pinnacle level of the mountain river tier. If he battled Huangji again at this moment, he was confident that he could suppress him in under 100 exchanges. Of course, Huangji had also perfected his comprehensions now, so his battle prowess had definitely risen significantly as well. Since both of them had seen great improvements, the victor of the battle would be determined by who had comprehended more regulations. Another day passed, and Ling Han perfected his regulations to the low extreme of the Sun-Moon tier. However, the speed of his comprehension became slower and slower. Even though his comprehension ability was astonishing, and even though he was receiving the blessing of heaven and earth at this moment, raising his comprehension speed by hundreds upon thousands of times, there was still a limit to how fast he could complete comprehension. 3 days passed, and the columns of light vanished one after another. Ling Han stood up and opened his eyes, which were filled with images of stars and galaxies. These images then disappeared, and his eyes returned to normal. However, there was a gentle look in his eyes, and they gave off a feeling of deep profoundness. Huangji and the 4 others also stood up at almost exactly the same time. There was a look of satisfaction on their faces, and it was clear that they had all enjoyed huge improvements these past 3 days. Of course, the corners of Huangji's mouth were still twitching from time to time, and everything would have looked much more peaceful if not for this. Since we've received the blessing of heaven and earth, we can probably leave this place now. Boom! The 9 of them instantly felt heavier as a strange force tugged at their bodies. In the next instant, they had already appeared outside the canyon of the mountain river forest. Not only them, but the hundreds of prodigies who had entered the mountain river forest were also teleported out. This signified the conclusion of the 2-realm prodigy gathering. Human! There was a furious roar, and Huangji's black hair billowed in the air as he glowered at Ling Han. His lock of white hair stood out starkly. Huangji didn't hold back as he unleashed the full power of his heavenly body tier aura, and a heavenly body that was only the size of a palm radiated with an overwhelming aura that belied its size. It was as if this heavenly body could crush anyone into a pulp. Low extreme of the heavenly body tier. If he were on the Joint Peace Planet, he could be regarded as a supreme being, although he wouldn't the most powerful of them. Here, however, heavenly body tier elites could only be regarded as elites. In fact, those at the low extreme were only barely worthy of being called elites. Anyhow, the battle prowess of king tiers like Huangji could definitely surpass 6 stars. In other words, his battle prowess was on par with the late stage or even peak stage of the medium extreme. More importantly, he still owned a Saint tool. This was a weapon of mass destruction, and it was capable of killing any heavenly body tier elite. In fact, it could even challenge elites at the low extreme of the Eternal River tier. Ling Han furrowed his brows. Do I have to use the Black Tower? Heh, since the 2-realm prodigy gathering has already concluded, Huangji. You're now using your power to pick on the weak. The Stone Emperor leaped over to stand in front of Ling Han. It was clear that he intended to help him. Pick on the weak? Huangji sneered loudly, and said, I've only cultivated for 200 years, and this person has definitely cultivated for longer than me. So, how can my challenge toward him be regarded as picking on the weak? In the cultivation world, battling against those at the same cultivation level was regarded as fair, and battling against those at the same age was also regarded as fair. The Stone Emperor faltered, and he turned back to glance at Ling Han. A look of surprise spread across his face, but then he laughed loudly, and said, "I suggest you look again closely. Is he really older than you?" Huangji was dismissive at first, yet after glancing at Ling Han, his expression suddenly became one of shock. In the mountain river forest, the mysterious power of heaven and earth had rendered him unable to determine Ling Han's situation. However, after returning to the outside world, he had now recovered Ho's heavenly body tier cultivation. Thus, he could naturally tell that Ling Han's age was definitely under 100. If his cultivation level were a little higher, he would be able to refine his estimate to under 50. However, he would definitely be even more shocked. To immortals, 100 years was truly not a long time. For many people, this was even shorter than one session of cultivation in seclusion. Anyhow, it was now clear that one of them was under 100 years old, while the other was around 200 years old. The difference between their age was at least twofold. This being the case, how could they be compared to each other? If anyone called this a battle between prodigies at the same age, they would surely have to be joking. Huangji's expression continued to change. In the end, he humphed coldly, and said, "Fine, I won't pick on the weak then. Hand me the essence divine flames, and I'll spare you this one time. The next time we meet, I'll definitely kill you without mercy." He definitely couldn't lose the essence divine flames. "You've got to be joking, that's my battle spoils." Ling Han smiled faintly, and continued, "Huangji, if you're dissatisfied with the results, why don't you suppress your cultivation and battle against me at the same cultivation level? See how I defeat you again." Huangji chuckled coldly, and said, "Humph. I'm hundreds of thousands of times more powerful than you, so why do I have to accommodate your needs?" He ignored the presence of the Stone Emperor and resolutely launched an attack at Ling Han. Impudence! The Stone Emperor bellowed loudly, and his voice transformed into a giant fist that smashed toward Huangji. Pang! Huangji was instantly sent flying. Pooh! Blood and flesh exploded from his body. He was no match for the Stone Emperor. Wang! For heavenly bodies materialized around the Stone Emperor. Consummate level of the heavenly body tier. No, perhaps he was at the pinnacle level of the heavenly body tier. The fifth heavenly body could be revealed or hidden by its owner. As expected of a saint's son. Regardless of how powerful Huangji was, his cultivation level meant that he was no match for the Stone Emperor, who was at least at the consummate level. Moreover, the Stone Emperor was also a supreme king tier, so he wouldn't lose against Huangji even if he were at the same cultivation level as him. Damn it! Huangji was drenched in blood, yet he was wild with rage at this moment. He retrieved his saint tool. Wang! His ancient mirror shuddered slightly, and a small dot of light gathered on its surface. Chapter 1319 Abyss. Xiao. The dot of light instantly transformed into a beam that shot at the Stone Emperor. "You think only you have a saint tool," the Stone Emperor said in disdain. Boom! His clothes instantly lit up, forming a powerful defense. Pang! The beam of light crashed into the Stone Emperor, yet it was unable to breach his defenses. One had to realize that this robe was knitted from thread that was made from phoenix blood true gold. This thread had been refined by the Cloud Stone Saint, and he had imbued it with his saintly martial intent, raising the saintly material to the peak of its abilities. So, just how powerful was this robe? This was a clash between saint tools, and the Stone Emperor was no weaker than Huangji. In fact, he still had some power to spare. "I've no time to bully you, fuck off," the Stone Emperor chided. They were both at the heavenly body tier, yet he was at the consummate level. They both owned saint tools, yet as a consummate level elite, he could naturally unleash more of its power and might. Although Huangji had almost been invincible in the mountain river forest, he wouldn't necessarily be the strongest prodigy if everyone unleashed their full power. For example, Ling Han had won first place, yet if they battled now, the North Emperor, the Stone Emperor, and Faceless could all suppress him after all. He still hadn't reached the pinnacle level of the Sun-Moon tier yet. Huangji gritted his teeth in anger. He possessed a saint tool that should have been able to kill any heavenly body tier elite, yet he was unable to deal with a melee Sun-Moon tier cultivator at this moment. Rumble. Everyone staggered as they felt a tremor beneath their feet. What's going on? Before they could come to their senses, there was a loud crack, and the earth beneath their feet collapsed with a deafening boom. Everyone fell into the earth. A bottomless abyss had unexpectedly opened up beneath them. This sudden turn of events left everyone flabbergasted. Some heavenly body tier elites tried to fly up, yet they were shocked to discover that the regulations of heaven and earth were far too chaotic in this place. In fact, they could use neither the regulations of the netherworld or the regulations of the immortal realm. Thus, the heavenly body tier elites could only free fall down the abyss alongside the Sun-Moon tier and Mountain River tier cultivators. Only Eternal River tier elites could manage to hover upward, though there were only very few of them. They all wore solemn expressions. The sudden appearance of this abyss left even them feeling apprehensive. In fact, they were so apprehensive that none of them reached down to grab any of the other cultivators. Otherwise, with their abilities, they should have been capable of rescuing at least 1/10 of the cultivators. Boom! Many people were like furious arrows, shooting down the abyss quicker and quicker under the influence of gravity. What was astonishing was the fact that this abyss was incredibly deep. They had already been free-falling for 100 heartbeats, yet there was still no indication that they were nearing the bottom. All they could hear was the howling wind becoming louder and louder in their ears. At this moment, those who possessed the bloodlines of demonic beasts capable of flight all activated their secret techniques and unfurled their wings. They quickly regained control over their bodies and started to fight against the gravitational pull of the abyss. The heavenly phoenix divine maiden also spread her phoenix wings. However, in order to avoid injuring others by accident, she shrunk the size of her wings to 9 meters in total. She beat her wings and flew toward Ling Han, and then pulled him into her embrace. "I can't fly up," she yelped in astonishment. Ling Han nodded upon hearing this. This abyss possessed a profound suction force. Otherwise, if there were only gravity involved, their speed wouldn't have reached such a level in such a short amount of time. "We'll land at the bottom first," Ling Han said. "This suction force can't remain this powerful forever. We'll fly back up when it weakens." The heavenly phoenix divine maiden nodded in agreement. She flapped her wings and started to soar toward the bottom of the abyss instead. They would see just how deep this abyss ran. After an entire hour of flight, they finally saw signs of the bottom. However, like a carpet of thorns, columns of razor-sharp stones poked out from the ground. Many of those who had reached the bottom before them were impaled on these stone columns, causing their intestines and organs to spill everywhere. It was truly a wretched sight. Fortunately, they were all immortals, so this amount of damage wouldn't be fatal. The wounded cultivators were all trying their best to pull themselves off the stone columns. Whoosh! A burst of wind swept toward a cave that lay before them. It was this wind that had formed the powerful suction force. The heavenly phoenix divine maiden retracted her wings. Then, both she and Ling Han found a stone column to hold onto so that they could resist the powerful pull of the suction force. Ling Han surveyed the surroundings. This was an underground cave, and it was extremely, extremely large. Meanwhile, another pitch-black cave lay before them, and he couldn't see into its depths even with his incredible eyesight. Whoosh! The burst of wind swept through the surroundings with incredible force. "Ah!" someone cried out in astonishment. They had failed to resist the pull of the wind, and they were quickly swept away, disappearing into the depths of the pitch-black cave. After a short while, their screams suddenly ceased, not to be heard again. The darkness in this abyss could swallow even sight, and thus it was simply impossible to see the depths of the cave clearly. What in the world was going on? Pang! A palm-sized object landed on the ground not far from where Ling Han was. This object was surprisingly heavy, and it caused terrifying shock waves to surge into the surroundings. Pang, pang, pang. The stone columns around it were instantly shattered into pieces. Fuck. I almost died from that. A miniature person of 3 inches tall crawled up from the ground. Wasn't this the Stone Emperor? He possessed the bloodline of rock spirits, so he was actually heavier than a mountain even though he was so small in stature. Thus, he didn't need to activate his origin power at all, as the suction force wasn't able to move him a single bit. This place is quite strange, the North Emperor said as he strode over. He had already activated the saber in his hand. This was a level 15 god tool, the most powerful god tool below the level of Saint tools. However, due to his cultivation level, the North Emperor wasn't able to unleash the full might of this saber. Yu Ying, the Cloud Maiden, Yang Lin, and the other king tiers all walked over. They were brimming with origin power, so they could maintain their balance and resist the wind even if they didn't hold on to the stone columns. Meanwhile, the prodigies of the Netherworld also gathered together on the other side. Right now, neither side trusted each other. The Netherworld believed that this was a trap laid by the Immortal Realm, while the Immortal Realm believed that this was a trap laid by the Netherworld. However, no one knew the truth of the situation. Screams continued to ring out as more and more people were swept away into the pitch-black cave by the strange wind. Their voices would all vanish after a short moment. Moreover, those who were swept away were all Mountain River tier cultivators. It was evident that they were too weak to resist the power of the strange wind. However, this still astonished Ling Han and the others. They naturally didn't pay much heed to the Mountain River tier cultivators, but they were surprised by the fact that just this wind alone was already so formidable. This being the case, would there be other more astonishing things lying in wait for them? Humph. For Eternal River tier elites walked over. For the Immortal Realm, this was the Wide Travel Monk King and the Wind Rider Divine King. As for the Netherworld, Ling Han wasn't too sure who they were. One looked like a pale-faced scholar, while the other was a wolf-headed brute. They were both incredibly powerful. Why are you hiding in the shadows? Show yourself, the Wind Rider Divine King roared. He lashed out with his palm, sending a silver river into the pitch-black cave. There were hundreds of glowing heavenly bodies in the silver river, and they illuminated the entire cave. Pang! Some unknown being in the depths of the cave attacked the silver river, instantly shattering it into pieces. The cave instantly became pitch-black again. However, a shocked expression spread across Ling Han's face. He had activated the Eye of Truth and seen the cave especially clearly. Meanwhile, the Stone Emperor and the others were either more powerful than him or also possessed a similar secret technique to him. As such, they were also able to catch a glimpse of the depths of the cave. You're tuning into the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.